The stories that change your life are rarely the ones that you're taught in school.
Coca-Cola's history starts all the way back in the late 19th century with a man known as Dr. John Stith Pemberton, a hustling chemist and pharmacist who served as a Confederate soldier during the American Civil War.
For many people in Japan, it was an ordinary day on November 17, 1906. However, it was also the birth of Soichiro Honda, who would go on to change the world in more ways than one.
The people you're about to meet built billion-dollar companies, changed science, transformed music, and inspired millions because they made different choices when life got hard.
Their personal rivalry would also create two of the world's most powerful brands, Adolf's Adidas and Rudolf's Puma.
Stephen Hawking is not only a brilliant scientist, but he himself has committed so much of his life, time, and effort to bringing the universe down to earth.
When I got old enough, I started to sing in church. I liked all type of music.
Hi, we are BTS!
Congratulations on your Billboard Music Award. You guys won Top Social Artist.
If you don't learn from people who already found a way through impossible odds, you'll end up repeating the same struggles instead of creating your own incredible story. In the next 3 hours, you'll learn how ordinary people overcame extraordinary obstacles to build legacies that change the world. If you've been before, put a hashtag Believe in the comments below so I can feature you here in a future video. And if you're new, welcome to Believe Nation, the only channel that helps you believe in yourself daily, one video at a time. Did you know Coca-Cola's secret formula is locked away in a vault? Coca-Cola's recipe is one of the best kept secrets in the world.
The formula for Coca-Cola may be the most closely guarded secret in the history of American commerce.
It's stored in a vault in Atlanta, Georgia, and only a few people at the company have access to it.
There's only one written copy of the secret formula, and it's locked in the vault of an Atlanta bank.
The original recipe for Coca-Cola actually had cocaine in it.
If you look carefully at the statements, as they say, cocaine was never part of the formula for Coca-Cola, which is perfectly accurate. But the extract of coca leaves was part of the original formula, and that is cocaine.
But don't worry, it was removed in the early 1900s. Even though the formula has changed, it remains a closely guarded secret to this day. John Pemberton, the creator of Coca-Cola, knew how important it was to protect what he built.
It's not as if Pemberton had created a new kind of cola. There were no colas. Period.
He created something special and made sure it was kept safe.
1886 was a good year for cultural icons. The Statue of Liberty was unveiled to great fanfare in New York Harbor, and in the basement of a house in Atlanta, Georgia, an unsuccessful pharmacist was brewing up something that started out as a soft drink, but ended up an icon of its own. His name was John Pemberton.
Today, the exact recipe is one of the most closely guarded trade secrets, and only those who need to know have access to it. You've got your own formula for creating success. Protect it like John Pemberton protected Coca-Cola's recipe. The most guarded secret on earth. There is a highly secure vault in Atlanta, Georgia. It is heavily guarded. It has thick metal doors. Keypads and security cameras monitor every single inch of the room. This vault does not hold gold. It does not hold diamonds. It does not hold millions of dollars in cash. It holds a single piece of paper, and on that piece of paper is a recipe. It is the secret formula for Coca-Cola. This recipe is one of the best kept secrets in the entire world. According to the official Coca-Cola website, the secret formula has been locked away for over a century. Only a very small group of special people at the company know what is actually on that paper. They keep their identities hidden. They are not even allowed to fly on the same airplane together. If the plane crashes, the company does not want to lose the only people who know how to make their product. This level of security sounds crazy for a soft drink, but this is not just a drink. It is a multi-billion-dollar empire, and it all started with one man, a kettle, and a very controversial ingredient. John Pemberton created something incredibly special. He knew how important it was to protect what he built. He made sure his creation was kept safe. And today we're going deep into the story of John Pemberton, the creation of his famous syrup, and the extreme lengths the company goes to in order to protect it. You're going to learn how to find your own winning formula, and more importantly, you're going to learn how to protect it. The Pharmacist and His Kettle. Okay, so the year was 1886. The place was Atlanta, Georgia. John Pemberton was a pharmacist. He was always mixing things together. He wanted to invent medicines that would help people feel better. So he spent hours in his backyard working over a three-legged brass kettle. He tested different roots, different herbs, and different spices. According to the historical records from the Coca-Cola archives, Pemberton finally created a fragrant caramel-colored liquid in May of 1886. 1986. He carried a jug of this new syrup down the street to Jacob's Pharmacy. He convinced a man working behind the counter to mix his syrup with carbonated water. They tasted it. They agreed it was excellent. They put it on sale for 5 cents a glass. Pemberton knew he had a great product. People loved the taste. They felt energized after drinking it. He did not just stumble into the success. He tested his ingredients over and over again. He gathered feedback from his customers. He paid attention to what people wanted. He kept tweaking the exact amount of each ingredient until the flavor was perfectly balanced. He realized that this specific combination of flavors was his most valuable asset. If anyone else figured out exactly what was in his kettle, they could easily make it themselves. They could steal his customers. They could ruin his business. So Pemberton kept the recipe entirely in his head. He refused to write it down. He only told a few trusted partners how to make the syrup. He understood the fundamental rule of business, that your unique creation is your power. If you give away your power, you lose your business. The controversial ingredient. Pemberton had a massive hit on his hands, but there was a major secret hiding inside that dark syrup. It is a fact that still shocks many people today. The original recipe for Coca-Cola actually contained cocaine. This is not a myth. According to the National Institute on Drug Abuse, early versions of the drink included trace amounts of cocaine extract from the coca leaf. This is actually where the first half of the name Coca-Cola comes from. The second half, cola, comes from the cola nut. The cola nut is a seed from a tree in Africa, and it contains high amounts of caffeine. Pemberton mixed the coca leaves and the cola nut together to create a powerful energy drink. In the late 1800s, people did not understand the severe dangers of cocaine. It was legal. It was used in many common medicines. People thought it was a safe way to cure headaches and give people energy. Pemberton used the science of his day to create a product that delivered a specific result for his customers. The drink made people feel alert and awake. However, science and society started to change. Doctors began to realize that cocaine was highly addictive and very dangerous. The public started to demand safer products. The leaders of the Coca-Cola company realized they had a huge problem. Their magic formula contained a dangerous drug now. They had to make a choice. They could keep the original recipe and risk destroying the company, or they could change the formula. They chose to adapt. By the early 1900s, the company completely removed the cocaine from the recipe. They figured out a way to keep the great taste while using coca leaves that had all the active cocaine removed. They protected the core flavor of the drink, but they eliminated the toxic part. This was a critical moment for Coca-Cola. If they had stubbornly refused to change Pemberton's original exact recipe, the company would have been shut down by the government. They survived because they protected the brand while adapting the product to fit the modern world. Locking down the legacy. After Pemberton died, a businessman named Asa Candler bought the rights to the formula. Candler was a marketing genius. He realized that the secrecy of the formula was actually a massive marketing tool. The more he hid the recipe, the more people wanted to talk about it. For decades, the recipe was still mostly kept in the minds of a few executives, but eventually the company needed to borrow a large amount of money from a bank. The bank demanded collateral. The company did not have enough physical assets to cover the loan, so they used the secret formula itself as collateral. In 1919, the recipe was finally written down on a piece of paper and locked in a bank vault in New York. The recipe became a literal physical asset. The document was later moved to a bank vault in Atlanta, where it sat untouched for 86 years. Then in 2011, the company decided to turn their secret into a massive public event. They built a custom high-tech vault inside the World of Coca-Cola Museum in Atlanta. They moved a piece of paper to this new vault. Millions of tourists visit this museum every year. They walk up to the giant metal door of the vault. They take pictures with it. They stand inches away from the most famous secret in the world, but they can never look inside. The company turned their security measures into a physical monument. They proved to the world that John Pemberton's original creation is still the most valuable thing that they own. The exact recipe remains a closely guarded trade secret. Only those who absolutely need to know have access to it. The formula, it's changed over the years. The cocaine is gone, but the core essence of what Pemberton built in his backyard kettle is still protected behind inches of solid steel. Lesson 1. Discover your unique advantage. You have your own formula for creating success. Every successful entrepreneur has one. Now, you might not be mixing syrup in a brass kettle in your backyard, but you are creating something special. You are building a specific set of skills. You are developing a unique way of solving problems for your customers. This is your formula. You need to identify exactly what makes you different from everyone else in your industry. For John Pemberton, it was the exact ratio of the sweet and the bitter flavors. For you, it might be the way you write software code. It might be your specific step-by-step coaching program. It might be the way that you edit videos. It might be your personal network of contacts. You have to sit down and figure out what your unfair advantage is. And once you find it, you have to refine it. Pemberton did not just mix things once and then he stopped. He tested his products. You must test your skills. You must ask for feedback. You must keep practicing until your service or your product is so good that people cannot easily copy it. If anyone can do what you do not have a formula yet. You have a hobby. And that's a great starting point, but it's still just a hobby. Find the thing that only you can do in your specific way. That is your Coca-Cola syrup. Lesson 2, the power of mystery. The Coca-Cola company proved that keeping a secret is powerful. You do not have to share every single detail of your business with the public. In fact, holding some things back can make you more attractive to your customers. When you share everything, you remove the mystery. People love a little bit of mystery. If you're a consultant, you can share your general strategies online. You can give away helpful advice, but you should protect your specific step-by-step frameworks and how you specifically do it. Keep those locked in your own personal vault. Only share them with your paying clients. If you own a bakery, share beautiful pictures of your cakes. Talk about how much you love baking, but never give away the exact ingredient list that makes your cake perfectly moist. The mystery makes the product more valuable. Customers will come to you because they know they cannot get that exact same result anywhere else. They want the magic that happens behind closed doors. So use mystery as a marketing tool. Let people know you have a special process, but make them pay to experience the results of that process. Lesson 3, adapting your formula. So Pemberton's original formula contained cocaine, right? It was a massive mistake by modern standards, but the company survived because they were willing to change. So you must be willing to change your formula too. Sometimes you will build a product or a service that works great in the beginning, but the market changes, technology changes, customers' demand change. You might realize that part of your business is actually toxic. Maybe you have a management style that drives good employees away. Maybe you are using outdated software that slows your clients down. Maybe your marketing strategy is annoying people instead of attracting the right people to you. You cannot be stubborn on the how. You're stubborn on the why, but not the how. Do not cling to your original ideas if the evidence shows that they're hurting you. You have to remove the bad ingredients from your business. And it can be hard to change something that you work so hard to build. It can take courage to admit that your original idea had some flaws, but true entrepreneurs know that the core mission is to serve the customer. You must protect the core value of your brand while constantly upgrading the parts that no longer work. So remove the toxic elements quickly and move forward. Lesson 4, protect what you built. John Pemberton knew the value of his creation. The Coca-Cola company built a literal steel vault to protect it. You must protect your business with the same level of focus. Now, you might not need a bank vault with cameras and keypads, but you do need to protect your intellectual property. You do need contracts. You do need non-disclosure agreements when you hire contractors. If you invent a new physical product, you should apply for a patent. If you create a unique brand name, you can apply for a trademark. Many new entrepreneurs are too trusting. They share their best ideas with their competitors. They do not protect their website with strong passwords. They do not secure their customer data. You are working too hard to let someone else steal your success. So treat your core business assets like they are priceless, because to your future, they are priceless. They actually are. So set up your legal protections early. Build your own digital vault. Make sure that the only people who absolutely need to know your secrets have access to them. You have greatness inside of you. You have a unique combination of talents and ideas that nobody else has. That is your secret formula. Respect it, develop it, and guard it fiercely. This man was told he might only have 2 years to live at 21.
My name is Stephen Hawking. Shortly after my 21st birthday, I went into hospital for tests. The doctors could offer no cure and gave me 2.5 years to live.
Today, he's one of the greatest scientists in history with discoveries that changed the way we understand the universe.
For the past 50 years, I have traveled the world, studying and lecturing about time and space and the laws that govern the universe.
Stephen Hawking is not only a brilliant scientist, but he himself has committed so much of his life, time and effort to bringing the universe down to Earth.
Stephen Hawking was born in 1942 in Oxford, England.
I was born in 1942, exactly 300 years after the death of Galileo.
As a kid, he loved asking big questions, wanted to understand how the world worked.
As I developed into a teenager, my parents taught me to always question things and think big.
At 17, he went to Oxford University to study physics. He was naturally good at it, and by his second year, he even won the University Physics Prize. However, he soon found out the curriculum was too easy and got bored with it.
We were asked to read chapter 10 in a book called Electricity and Magnetism. And at the end of that chapter, there are 13 questions, all of them final honours questions. I discovered very rapidly that I couldn't do any of them. Richard and I worked together for the week, and we managed to do 1.5 questions, which we felt very proud of. Stephen, as always, hadn't even started. But the next morning, he went up to his rooms at 9 o'clock, and we came back about 12, maybe 5 past 12. And down came Stephen, and we were in the college gateway in the lodge. "Ah, Hawking," I said, "how many have you managed to do then?" "Well," he said, "I've only had time to do the first 10. And I think at that point we realised that it's not just that we weren't in the same street, we weren't on the same planet.
To challenge himself in a different way, Stephen joined the rowing club at Oxford.
At Oxford, I joined the rowing club and became a cox. I relished in the freedom, the speed, and of course, calling the shots.
The club was a place where students came together to compete in rowing races and stay active. It gave Stephen a chance to relax, have fun, and socialize outside of his studies. But just as things seemed to be going well, Stephen began noticing something strange. He started feeling clumsy, bumping into things, and having trouble walking.
During my final year at Oxford, I had noticed that I was getting rather clumsy in my movements, and I fell over once or twice for no apparent reason.
His speech also began to slur. After a series of tests, doctor told him at 21 he had ALS, a disease that would slowly take away his ability to move and speak. They said he might only have 2 years to live.
Eventually, I was diagnosed with amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, otherwise known as motor neuron disease or ALS. The prognosis was not good. I was given 2 to 3 years to live.
This news was devastating, and at first Stephen felt lost and uncertain about his future. But he didn't let that stop him. Instead of giving up, Stephen Hawking decided to keep working on his research.
After my expectations had been reduced to 0, every new day became a bonus, and I began to appreciate everything I did have. While there's life, there is hope.
Around this time, Stephen Hawking met Jane in 1963. As his illness worsened, daily life became harder. He struggled with walking, holding objects, writing by hand, and speaking clearly. Simple tasks like getting dressed, moving around campus, and taking notes were difficult. Jane helped Stephen with these daily tasks so he could focus on his studies. She supported him at home and encouraged him during difficult moments.
At first, there did not seem much point in working at my research, because I didn't expect to live long enough to finish my PhD. But what really made a difference was, I got engaged to a girl called Jane Wilde. This gave me something to live for.
With Jane's help managing daily life, Stephen finished his research, completed his dissertation, and earned his PhD from the University of Cambridge. Stephen also met Roger Penrose, a mathematician who taught him about black holes. Using what he learned, Stephen made a major discovery. He found that black holes can give off radiation, changing how scientists understood them. Later, Stephen wrote A Brief History of Time, a book that explained complex science in simple language. The book became a bestseller, and his work became known around the world. Even after he lost his ability to speak, Stephen used a computer to communicate and continued sharing his ideas. Throughout his life, Stephen received many major awards, including the Copley Medal and the prestigious Medal of Freedom. Although doctors once said he might not live long, Stephen lived for more than 50 years and made lasting contributions to science. Today, he's remembered as one of the greatest scientists in history.
And however difficult life may seem, there is always something you can do and succeed at. It matters that you don't just give up.
When things feel impossible, remember, quitting is never the answer. Keep going. You've got this. Imagine you're 21 years old. You're smart, young, and ready to take on the world. You have your whole life ahead of you. Then you start dropping things. You trip over your own feet. You slur your words when you talk. You go to the doctor expecting a simple fix. Instead, the doctor tells you that you have a rare disease called ALS. The doctor says your muscles will slowly stop working. Then the doctor tells you that you only have 2 years to live. This is exactly what happened to Stephen Hawking in 1963. Most people, they just give up right then. Most people would go home, get into bed, and wait for the end. And Stephen Hawking did that at first. He felt completely lost. He listened to the music of Richard Wagner and felt sorry for himself. He thought his life was over before it even started. But then something changed. He realized that if he was going to die soon, he wanted to actually do something with the time he had left. He decided to get to work. He met a woman named Jane Wilde. She gave him hope. She gave him a reason to keep fighting. They got married, and Stephen realized he needed to provide for his new family. He needed a job. To get a job as a professor, he needed to finish his PhD at the University of Cambridge. So he stopped making excuses and started working harder than he has ever had in his life. He found his drive. Every successful person needs a moment when they decide to stop making excuses. Stephen Hawking found his moment in the darkest time of his life. To search for a purpose. Stephen Hawking needed to find a specific problem to solve. In the business world, you look for a gap in the market. In the science world, you look for a gap in human knowledge. Stephen looked up at the stars. He became fascinated by black holes. Back then, people didn't know much about black holes. They were a mystery. Stephen saw this mystery as his opportunity. He teamed up with a mathematician named Roger Penrose. Roger had an idea about how stars collapse. Stephen took that idea and applied it to the entire universe. Stephen proposed the idea that the universe started as a single point called a singularity. He didn't present this as an absolute fact, but his math suggested it was a strong possibility. He started getting noticed. He was not just a sick young man anymore. He was becoming a respected mind in physics. But as his mind grew stronger, his body grew weaker. He started using a wheelchair. He needed help getting dressed. He needed help eating. Most people see physical limits as the reason to stop. Stephen saw them as a reason to focus. Because he couldn't write long equations on a chalkboard, he had to see math in his head. He developed a new way to think about shapes and geometry. He turned his weakness into a pretty unique strength for him. He solved problems in ways that other scientists couldn't even imagine. This was a massive lesson for anyone trying to build something great. You will face limits. You will face roadblocks. You will have to find ways to work around them. You have to invent new ways to win. Expanding the mind. Stephen Hawking kept pushing the boundaries. He looked at black holes again. Scientists thought that nothing could ever escape a black hole, not even light. But Stephen used his unique way of thinking to look deeper. He combined different areas of physics that no one had ever combined before. He proposed that black holes actually leak energy over time. The idea was later named Hawking radiation. It completely shocked the science world. This was his big breakthrough. It put his name on the map. He was building his reputation. He was becoming a leader in his field. But life threw another massive obstacle in his path. In 1985, he went to Switzerland. He caught a terrible case of pneumonia. He was in a coma. He was kept alive by a machine. The doctors asked his wife, Jane, if they should turn off the machine. Jane said no. The doctors had to perform a surgery called a tracheotomy to save his life. The surgery saved him, but it took away his ability to speak. He was completely silent. He was a man who made his living by sharing big ideas, and now he had no voice. The sound of silence. Think about how terrifying that must be. Your entire value to the world is locked inside your head, and you have no way to get it out. At first, Stephen communicated by raising his eyebrows when someone pointed to letters on a card. It was painfully slow. It took him minutes just to spell a single word, but Stephen refused to be silenced. A computer programmer in California named Walt Wolters heard about Stephen's problem. Walt sent Stephen a computer program called Equalizer. This program let Stephen choose words from a screen using a switch in his hand. Later, when he lost the use of his hand, he used a sensor attached to his cheek. He could twitch his cheek muscle to stop the cursor on a word. A speech synthesizer would then read the words out loud. Stephen got his voice back. It sounded like a robot, but it became his trademark. It became part of his brand. He didn't let the loss of his natural voice stop him. He used technology to keep moving forward. He realized that his work was too important to keep locked inside his own mind. He had to share it with the world. Writing a bestseller. Stephen Hawking had a new goal. He wanted to write a book about the universe. He did not want to write a textbook for other scientists. He wanted to write a book for regular people. He wanted to explain the hardest concepts in the simplest way. This is the ultimate goal, I think, of any great entrepreneur. You have to take something complex and make it easy for the customer to understand. He called the book A Brief History of Time. Now, writing it was not easy. He had to dictate the entire book using his cheek muscle, one word at a time. It took incredible patience. He also had to fight with his editors. The publisher told Stephen that for every math equation he put in the book, his sales would be cut in half. Stephen listened to this advice. He only kept one equation in the entire book. It was E equals MC squared. Stephen worked hard to make the language clear. He rewrote sections over and over again. He wanted the book to be sold in airports, not just in the university bookstores. He wanted massive reach. The book came out in 1988. It was a massive hit. It stayed on the Sunday Times bestseller list for a record-breaking 237 weeks. It sold over 25 million copies worldwide. Stephen Hawking was not just a scientist anymore. He was an author. He was a creator. He brought the universe to the masses. He proved that if you can explain a big idea simply, people will listen. He built a massive audience by focusing on clarity and value. Becoming a global icon. Stephen Hawking understood the power of visibility. He didn't hide in his laboratory. He went out into the world. He understood that to make a real impact, people needed to know his name. He embraced his unique image. He allowed his robotic voice and his wheelchair to become symbols of his human brilliance. He appeared on popular TV shows. He was on The Simpsons. He was on Star Trek. He was on The Big Bang Theory. He made science cool. He reached people who would never normally read a physics book. He used his fame to talk about important issues. He warned the world about the dangers of artificial intelligence. He talked about the need for humans to explore space. He used his platform to try and protect the future of humanity. He was always thinking bigger. He was always looking at the next challenge. He never settled for the success he already had. Zero excuses. Stephen Hawking lived for 55 years after doctors told him he only had 2 years left. He completely defied the odds. He changed how we see the stars. He wrote books that millions of people read. He did all of this while trapped in a body that could not move. When you look at his life, you lose the right to make excuses. If Stephen Hawking could unlock the secrets of black holes using only a cheek muscle, what can you do with the tools you have right now? He faced ultimate constraints and he still produced world-class work. He focused entirely on what he could do and he ignored what he could not do. He trained his mind to be free while his body was stuck. And he built a global brand. He educated the world. He never stopped being curious. He never stopped asking the big questions. He once said, "However difficult life may seem, there is always something you can do and succeed at." He proved that success is not about what happens to you. It is about how you respond to what happens to you. It's about taking the hardest moments and turning them into your motivation. It's about refusing to quit because you have greatness inside you. You just have to decide to let it out. You have to decide to keep pushing forward no matter what stands in your way. So keep asking questions. Keep putting in the work.
Meet BTS, a 7-member South Korean boy band from Seoul.
This group went from debuting with a small album on a tight budget to becoming the first K-pop group to top the Billboard Hot 100.
BTS made history once again as it topped Billboard's main singles chart with a non-English song.
In 2010, Bong Shi-hyuk, the founder of Big Hit Entertainment, saw something special in 7 young, talented individuals. He formed Bangtan Sonyeondan, BTS, which was Korean for Bulletproof Boy Scouts, with the vision of creating a group that would stand out in the crowded K-pop industry. While many K-pop groups followed a polished, glamorous image, BTS wanted to connect with their fans through real, emotional, and relatable stories. Their music covered topics like struggles, dreams, and self-empowerment, subjects that were not common in K-pop at the time. However, BTS didn't fit the typical K-pop mold. Their mix of hip-hop and K-pop was new and different, and many people didn't immediately understand it. Big Hit Entertainment, their agency, was small and didn't have the same resources or influence as the bigger agencies in the K-pop industry. In 2013, BTS debuted with Too Cool for School. The album didn't bring them instant fame, but it was the start of their journey. With limited funds and little exposure, BTS kept pushing forward, staying true to their vision. They focused on making music that resonated with their fans, which gradually helped them build a strong and loyal following.
Hi, we are BTS.
Congratulations on your Billboard Music Award. You guys won Top Social Artist.
Among their many firsts, they were the first Korean pop band to present at the Grammy Awards.
The biggest turning point in BTS's career came in 2015 with the release of The Most Beautiful Moment in Life Part 1. The album connected with fans because it addressed the struggles and emotions of young people dealing with themes like loneliness and love and growing up. The album quickly gained attention and BTS began to rise in popularity. The following year in 2016, they released Wings, which cemented their status as an international sensation. That same year, BTS made history by topping the Billboard 200 chart and winning their first Billboard Music Award. Since then, BTS has sold over 30 million albums worldwide, and their music videos have billions of views. They have more than 60 million followers on Twitter, making them one of the biggest musical acts in the world. In 2020, they made history again by becoming the first K-pop group to reach #1 on the Billboard Hot 100. BTS also became the youngest group to receive the Order of Cultural Merit from the South Korean government. Their contributions have gone beyond music. They've brought more than $3.6 billion to South Korea's economy through music, sales, merchandise, and tours. You don't need to fit in someone else's box to succeed. BTS shows us that breaking the mold can lead to greatness. The monopolized market. So in the year 2010, the music industry in South Korea was a closed system. It was controlled by three massive companies. People called them the Big Three. These companies had millions of dollars in the bank. They had deep relationships with all the major television networks. And if an artist signed with one of these three giants, they were guaranteed a spot on television. The big companies operated like factories. They took young teenagers and trained them for years. They controlled exactly what the artists wore, what they sang, and how they acted. The final product was always perfectly polished. If you wanted to start a new music company, you were at a huge disadvantage. You could not get your artists on the television. You could not compete with the massive marketing budgets of the Big Three. It was a monopoly. Most new companies failed very quickly, but one man decided to try anyway. He had worked as a producer for one of the big companies. He was very successful there, but he wanted to build something different. He left his secure job and started a tiny company. He had almost no money. His company was deep in debt, but he had a clear vision for a new kind of business. Building a product. The founder knew he could not compete with the Big Three by copying their strategy. If he tried to make a perfect, shiny pop group, the giant companies would crush him. He had to create a different product. He decided to find artists who could write their own music. He wanted them to sing about real, painful emotions. This was completely new at the time. At the time, popular music groups in South Korea did not sing about depression or anxiety or the fear of failure. They sang happy, catchy love songs. So he started holding auditions. He looked for young men who had real stories to tell, and he found 7 talented individuals. He gave the group a name that translates to Bulletproof Boy Scouts in English. He wanted the group to block out the harsh stereotypes of the world like a bulletproof vest. He told the 7 members to be completely honest. He told them to write lyrics about their actual struggles. He didn't want them to act like perfect idols that you see on TV. He wanted them to act like real human beings. Now, this is a massive risk. In business, when you introduce a product that goes against the current market trends, you risk total failure. People might not understand it, but the founder understood a fundamental rule of entrepreneurship. If you want true customer loyalty, you must build a deep emotional connection with people. Customers do not connect with perfection. They connect with authenticity. They connect with struggle. the lean startup struggle. So in 2013, BTS finally debuted. They released their first album called Too Cool for School. It was a monumental day for the 7 members, but the reality was pretty harsh. The album did not bring them instant fame. In fact, their early years were filled with actual intense struggle. Their company was on the edge of bankruptcy. They operated like a lean startup with almost zero cash. The 7 members lived together in one tiny cramped dorm room. They slept in bunk beds in the same room. Sometimes they didn't know if the company could afford to buy them food or not. They had to shoot their early music videos on extremely tight budgets. They borrowed clothes and used their own managers as background extras in their videos. Because their company was so small, the television networks did not want to put BTS on the screen. The networks always gave the prime television spots to the groups from the big 3 agencies. Most new businesses fail in their first year business because they run out of money and they lose hope. BTS faced constant rejection. People in the industry looked down on them because they came from a poor, unknown company. Their mix of heavy hip-hop and pop music was confusing to many listeners, but they refused to quit. They kept working on their product. They practiced their dancing for 10 hours a day. They wrote lyrics late into the night. They stayed completely true to their original vision. Bypassing the gatekeepers. Every successful business needs a marketing strategy. Since BTS could not get on television, they had to find a different way to reach their audience. So they turned to the internet. Today, social media marketing is pretty normal. But back then, the big entertainment companies tightly controlled their artists on the internet. The big agencies did not let their artists post directly to social media. They wanted to maintain a perfect but distant image. BTS did the exact opposite. They picked up their phones and they started filming themselves. They posted hundreds of videos on YouTube. They used Twitter to talk directly to their fans. They used a live video platform to broadcast themselves eating dinner, playing games, and just talking about their bad days. They showed their messy dorm room. They showed their mistakes. They showed their exhaustion from all the work they were doing. This strategy cost $0. It was completely free marketing, but it generated incredible value. By using social media this way, BTS bypassed the traditional gatekeepers. They didn't need the television networks to approve them anymore. They built a direct pipeline right to their fans. When you own the direct relationship with your customers, you start to hold the power. So they built a massive dedicated community of fans. The fans felt a personal connection to the members. They did not just consume the music, they became champions of it. The tipping point. If you stay consistent, your breakthrough will eventually come. For BTS, the biggest turning point in their career happened in 2015. They released an album called The Most Beautiful Moment in Life, Part 1. This is when their business truly exploded. The product perfectly matched the market demand. The album addressed the extreme pressures and emotional struggles of young people. The songs dealt with themes like loneliness and societal expectations and the pain of growing up. Young people all over the world, not just Korea, heard the music and felt understood. The honest lyrics resonated deep with people, and the album quickly gained massive attention. The grassroots community that they had built on the internet started sharing the music everywhere. The fans translated the lyrics into English and Spanish and dozens of other languages. The fans became a global marketing team that worked for free because they believed in the message. BTS began to rise rapidly in popularity. They proved that you do not need the backing of a massive corporate machine if you have an outstanding product and a highly engaged community. All the years of eating cheap food, sleeping in one room, and posting free videos online finally started paying off. Expanding the empire. Now, once you find success, you need to scale the business. BTS did not slow down after their first big hit. They accelerated. So in 2016, they released a massive album called Wings. This album cemented their status as an international sensation. They broke sales records. They started selling out large arenas. Then they took their business global. In 2017, they achieved something that shocked the entire music industry. They won their first Billboard Music Award for Top Social Artist. They beat some of the biggest American pop stars for this award. They won it entirely because their loyal fan base voted for them millions of times on the internet. The giant entertainment companies back home were completely stunned. The poor underdog from the tiny agency had just beaten everyone on the global stage. The success of BTS completely transformed their company. The small agency went from a struggling startup into now a global powerhouse. They expanded their business model. They bought out other music companies. They built technology platforms. When their company became publicly traded on the stock market, it was a massive financial event. The founder became a billionaire. The 7 members of BTS became incredibly wealthy. They earned equity in the company they helped build. The staggering numbers. The metrics of their success are absolutely staggering. Since their difficult debut, BTS has sold over 30 million albums worldwide. Their music videos receive billions of views. They have massive influence on social media. They broke world records by reaching over 60 million followers on Twitter and Instagram. They are one of the most powerful business entities in the world. And in 2020, they shattered another massive barrier. They released a song called Dynamite. It became the first song by a South Korean group to reach #1 on the Billboard Hot 100 chart in the United States. They sold out multiple nights at massive stadiums all across the globe. They performed at the United Nations. They proved that language is not a barrier when the emotional connection is real. The economic powerhouse. You have to understand the true scale of what they build. BTS is not just a music group. They are a massive economic engine. They move entire markets. Research shows that BTS brings in more than $3.6 billion to South Korea's economy every single year. They generate this unbelievable amount of money through multiple revenue streams now. They sell their digital music, physical albums, concert tickets, and massive amounts of merchandise. But their impact goes even further. Hundreds of thousands of tourists travel to their home country just because of BTS. These tourists spend money on flights, hotels, food. People all over the world buy the clothing brands that BTS wears. Fans actively study the language and eat the local food because they want to feel closer to the group. They drive massive export growth for their entire country. The government recognized this unbelievable contribution, and BTS became the youngest group to ever receive the Order of Cultural Merit from the South Korean government. This is an incredibly prestigious honor. It is usually given to older individuals who've spent 50 years improving the national culture. BTS earned it in just a few short years of hard work, and they did it by refusing to be the standard. The entrepreneurial playbook. So if you're building a business, you need to study their exact playbook. Write down these lessons and apply them to your life and your company today. First, never try to beat the giant corporations at their own game. So if you're a small startup, you will lose if you copy the big companies. You must find a different angle. BTS didn't try to be the most polished idol group. They chose to be the most authentic group. They turned their weakness into their greatest strength. Second, use every free tool you have to bypass the gatekeepers. You do not need permission from TV networks or publishers or investors to reach your audience. BTS built a massive loyal community using a cheap camera and an internet connection. They posted consistent, honest content. They went directly to the end consumer. Third, fiercely protect your community. Treat your early customers with absolute respect. Their fan base is the most powerful marketing force on the planet because BTS never takes them for granted. They listen to their fans, they create content specifically for their fans, and if you take care of your community will build your business for you. And finally, you must stay completely true to your vision, especially when it hurts. In 2013, BTS, they had no money. They were constantly criticized. They were starving. It would have been easy for them to quit. It would have been easy for them to change their music to match the popular trends of the day. But they held on to their core message. They believed in what they were doing. You do not need to fit into someone else's box to succeed. You do not need to follow the traditional rules of your industry. BTS shows us that breaking the mold is exactly how you achieve true greatness. You have to believe in your own path. You have to put in the grueling work every single day. Did you know that Adidas and Puma were started by 2 brothers who once worked together?
Their personal rivalry would also create 2 of the world's most powerful brands, Adolf's Adidas and Rudolf's Puma.
In 1924, Adolf Dassler, Adi, and his brother Rudolf Dassler, Rudi, ran a successful shoe company in Germany called the Brüder Dassler Schuhfabrik, which means Dassler Brothers Shoe Factory.
In 1924, the Dassler brothers took a bold step forward and officially founded Gebruder Dassler Schuhfabrik.
They made shoes for athletes, and their shoes became popular when Jesse Owens wore them during the 1936 Olympics.
At the Berlin Olympics, Black American Jesse Owens made history by winning 4 gold medals. setting 3 world records and breaking or equaling 9 Olympic records. And he did all that while wearing Adi and Rudi's Gebrüder Dassler shoes.
But after World War II, the brothers had personal disagreements. It's unclear exactly what happened, but it's believed they didn't get along because they had different ideas about running the business. The situation got worse, and in 1948, they could no longer work together and split their company's assets.
In 1948, the brothers split their company in half. Adi took the north side of the river and named his company Adidas. Rudi took the south side and named his company Puma.
So Rudi started Puma in Herzogenaurach, Germany in 1948, and Adi started Adidas in the same town in 1949. Their rivalry grew so strong that even the town became divided.
The rivalry between the two companies was so great that Puma and Adidas were reminiscent of rival gangs.
People in the town took sides, with some supporting Adidas and some supporting Puma. Some stores only sold Adidas shoes and clothes, while others only sold Puma items. Even the local sports teams chose one brand over the other.
Herzogenaurach, their Bavarian hometown of approximately 24,000 people, split into 2 warring camps. There were Adidas bakeries and Puma bakeries, Adidas pubs and Puma pubs. Intermarriage between Adidas families and Puma families was actively discouraged.
Competition helps you grow, embrace challenges, and become better and stronger. Imagine walking into a local grocery store in your hometown. You walk up to the counter to buy a simple loaf of bread. The cashier doesn't look at your face. The cashier looks straight down at your feet. He sees the wrong brand of shoes on your feet. He shakes his head, takes the bread off the counter, and tells you to leave. Sounds like a scene from a movie, but this was the real life in the small German town of Herzogenaurach. 2 brothers started a tiny shoe company together. They worked side by side. They conquered the sports world. Then they started to hate each other. And their hatred became so bitter and so toxic that it split their family forever. It split their massive company in half. It even split their entire town right down the middle. One brother started Adidas, the other brother started Puma. They built 2 of the biggest brands in human history. They lived in the same small town, but they never spoke to each other again. So today we're going to deep dive into the greatest family rivalry, I think, in business history. We're not just covering their whole lives. We're going to look at exactly why Adolf and Rudolf Dassler went to war, and more importantly, uncover the exact lessons that you need to use competition to win in your own business. The brothers who built an empire together. So Adolf Dassler was known as Adi. His older brother Rudolf was known as Rudi. In 1924, they decided to start a business together. They called it the Dassler Brothers Shoe Factory. They did not start in some fancy office. They started in their mother's small washroom. Germany was going through terrible times after World War I. Electricity was not reliable. The brothers often had to power their equipment by pedaling a stationary bike. They were the perfect team because they were completely different. Adi was the quiet genius. He was a craftsman. He loved sitting alone and designing better shoes. And Rudi was the loud, outgoing salesman. He loved to talk to people. He loved making deals. They worked hard and their shoes gained a strong local reputation. But the real breakthrough happened in 1936. The Olympic Games were happening in Berlin. Adi Dassler packed a suitcase full of his newly designed shoes. These shoes had special spikes on the bottom. Adi drove to the Olympic Village. He found the famous American runner Jesse Owens. He convinced Owens to wear the Dassler shoes during the races. Jesse Owens wore those shoes and won 4 gold medals. Suddenly, the whole world saw the Dassler shoes. Athletes everywhere wanted them. Business exploded. Before World War II started, the brothers were selling 200,000 pairs of shoes every single year. They had fame, they had money, they had an empire. But success does not always bring peace. Often success just turns up the heat. And the heat was about to burn their relationship to the ground. The whispers of war and the ultimate betrayal. The tensions between Adi and Rudi started slowly. They began to argue about how to run the factory. Rudi felt Adi was trying to take total control of the business decisions. Adi felt Rudi was too focused on sales and didn't care enough about the quality of the shoes. Their wives also didn't get along. They all lived in the same large house, which made the arguments worse. Then World War II started. The stress of the war pushed the brothers to the breaking point. Historians point to one specific night in 1943 as the moment the relationship died. The town was being bombed by Allied planes. Rudi and his family ran into a bomb shelter. A few minutes later, Adi and his wife ran into the exact same shelter. As Adi entered the dark room, he said, The dirty bastards are back again. Adi was talking about the warplanes dropping bombs outside, but Rudy was deeply paranoid. Rudy firmly believed that Adi was talking about him and his family. That one sentence destroyed everything. Rudy never forgave Adi. Things got much worse. Later in the war, Rudy was sent to a prisoner camp. Rudy was convinced that Adi had given information to the authorities to get him arrested. Rudy thought Adi wanted him locked up so Adi could steal the whole company. After the war, the American military investigated the brothers. During these investigations, the brothers actively betrayed each other. They each tried to blame the other brother to save themselves. The trust was completely gone. The love was dead. In 1948, they realized they could not spend another day in the same building. They decided to break their massive company apart. They divided the factory equipment, they divided the patents, they even made the employees choose which brother they wanted to go work for. The Dassler brothers' shoe factory was dead. The war of the brands had just begun. The town with the bent necks. The split in 1948 was pretty vicious. Rudy took his share of the business, walked across the small river of Alrock, and started a new company. He called it Puma. In 1948, Adi stayed on his side of the river. He took his first name and his last name and combined them. He called his company Adidas. The family fight didn't stay inside the family. It swallowed the entire town. The river became a strict physical border. You were either an Adidas person or you were a Puma person. There was no middle ground. The town quickly earned a strange nickname. It was called the town of bent necks. People were called this because whenever two people met on the street, they immediately looked down at the other person's shoes. If you wore Adidas, you only talked to people wearing Adidas. If you wore Puma, you only talked to people wearing Puma. The division controlled daily life. The town had specific Adidas pubs where only Adi's workers could drink, and there were specific Puma pubs for Rudy's workers. If you were a plumber and you wanted to fix the pipes at the Adidas factory, you better not be caught wearing Puma shoes. The local bakeries took sides. The local butchers took sides. If a worker from the Adidas factory started dating a worker from the Puma factory, it was treated like a terrible scandal. Families would refuse to speak to their own children if they married someone from the enemy brand. Even the town's sports teams were dragged into the war. The town had two local football clubs. ASV was supported by Adidas and One FC was supported by Puma. The rivalries on the field were brutal because the players were fighting for the honor of their local factories. The brothers used this town's division to fuel their global ambitions. They spied on each other constantly. If workers at Puma saw a delivery truck bringing new leather to Adidas, they would run to tell Rudy. If Adidas released a new football shoe, Puma would rush to release a lighter one. The hatred was a daily fire that kept both factories running at maximum speed. The power of the enemy. So why did this terrible family tragedy create two of the most successful sports brands in history? The answer lies in the intense power of competition. When you have a comfortable lead in business, you often get lazy, you sleep in, you stop taking risks. But when you have a bitter enemy right across the river, you can't relax for a single second. The pain of losing to your enemy is just too great. Science proves that rivalries physically change how hard we work. A major study by researcher Gavin Kilduff at New York University looked at the psychology of competition. He studied long-distance runners. He found that when a runner competed against a known rival, they ran significantly faster than when they raced against complete strangers. The emotional connection to defeating a specific enemy pushes a human brain and body beyond normal limits. Adi and Rudy hated each other, but that hatred forced them to innovate faster than anyone else in the world. Adi was obsessed with beating Puma on the football field. He worked day and night to invent the first football boots with screw-in studs. The shoes helped the German national team win the 1954 World Cup in muddy conditions. Rudy was obsessed with beating Adidas in marketing. He pushed Puma to sponsor massive global stars like Pele to prove Puma was the cooler brand. They fought in the courts over their patents. They fought at the Olympics over the athletes. They fought in the stores over the shelf space. If they had stayed together, they might have stayed a comfortable, medium-sized German shoe company. By splitting apart and becoming mortal enemies, they built two global empires that changed the sports world forever. Lessons for entrepreneurs. Okay, so you don't need to ruin your family to build a great business, but you must absolutely learn the hidden strategies inside the Dassler brothers story. And so here are some of the deepest lessons you can apply to your life and your business right now. Lesson number 1, use anger as motivation, not poison. The Dassler brothers were furious with each other, but they did not sit at home crying about the past. They channeled that anger into their work. So when you face a setback or someone insults your business, don't waste that energy complaining or crying. Take that dark energy when it comes and pour it into making your product better. Let the success of your competitors bother you just enough to wake you up earlier in the morning. Competition helps you grow. So embrace the challenges to become better and stronger. Lesson number 2, force your audience to choose. So that small German town took sides because the brands had a clear identity. Now, you don't want customers to just like your product. You want customers who defend your product. And to get that kind of loyalty, you have to stand for something specific. Adidas stood for engineering and quiet performance. Puma stood for bold energy and loud marketing. When you try to please everyone, you please no one. So be bold enough to make some people dislike you, and the people who love you will love you even more. Lesson number 3, differentiation is your greatest weapon. Adi and Rudy succeeded because they stopped trying to do the exact same things. Adi knew he was a terrible salesman, so he stayed in the workshop and obsessed over the athlete's needs. Rudy knew he was not a great designer, so he focused entirely on brilliant marketing and getting his shoes on the feet of celebrities. Find the one specific thing that you do better than anyone else in your market. Stop trying to fix all of your weaknesses. Double down entirely on your greatest strength. Lesson number 4, the market is bigger than you think. When the brothers split, people thought the town was too small to support 2 massive shoe factories. They thought one brother would eventually bankrupt the other brother. They were wrong. The intense competition actually expanded the entire market for sports shoes. By constantly fighting to be the best, they convinced the whole world that athletic shoes were important. So don't look at your competitors as people just stealing your slice of the pie. Look at them and people helping you make the entire pie much bigger. Lesson number 5, speed is driven by paranoia sometimes. The workers in the town worked incredibly fast because they knew the factory just across the river was working just as hard as them. You must build a sense of urgency in your own business. Even if you don't have a real enemy across the street, you can invent one in your mind. Assume someone is working right now to steal your customers. Assume someone is building a better version of your product right now. Use a healthy version of paranoia so you can move faster. The Dassler brothers went to their graves without ever making peace. They are buried in the same cemetery in their small town. But even in death, they were placed as far away from each other as possible. Their personal story is a tragedy, but their business story is really helpful and shows the power of just pressure. They prove that comfort becomes the enemy of greatness. They prove that the hardest challenges in your life can become the exact tools that you use to then go off and build your empire. So look at your business today. Look at the competitors that you are afraid of. Stop hiding from them. Step up to the line, look them in the eye, and use their presence to make yourself stronger. Nobody talks about the time Elvis Presley was a truck driver.
He got a job as a truck driver at Crown Electric for a good salary of $40 a week.
Unknown, working long days and singing along to the radio while dreaming of something bigger. Elvis Presley grew up poor in Tupelo, Mississippi. His family lived in a small house and money was always tight.
Elvis came from a very poor upbringing.
When Elvis was 10, he wanted a bicycle for his birthday, but his parents couldn't afford one. Instead, his mother bought him a guitar because it was cheaper.
Gladys bought her son his first guitar at the Tupelo hardware store for $7.90 for Elvis's 11th birthday.
At first, Elvis was shy, but he started playing every day. He practiced after school and sang quietly to himself.
Presley recalled, "I took the guitar and I watched people and I learned to play a little bit. But I would never sing in public. I was very shy about it."
That guitar became his escape from hard times and helped him believe in a better future. As Elvis got older, music became a part of his everyday life. He listened to gospel music at church, blues on the radio, and country songs at home.
When I got old enough, I started to sing in church. I liked all type of music.
After high school, Elvis worked as a truck driver in Memphis, delivering supplies and equipment. During long drives, he sang along to the radio and practiced his voice. Even while working, he kept dreaming about becoming a singer.
I vocalize every day. I practice if I'm working or not.
In 1953, Elvis walked into Sun Records because he wanted to record a song as a gift for his mother.
I made that first record really as a personal thing. my mother.
When I was working for Sam Phillips, one of the services we offered was a general recording service, $3 one side, $4 two. One day, a very strange-looking young man with sideburns came in and said he wanted to make a record for his mother. I believe he said for his mother's birthday.
He paid $4 and recorded My Happiness, and That's When Your Heartaches Begin. He wasn't trying to be famous, he just wanted his mom to hear his voice on a record. The studio owner, Sam Phillips, noticed that Elvis sounded different from anyone else.
After listening to his voice, seeing his demeanor, his manner, and what I thought was a very different style, I was highly impressed with what I thought he could do as an artist.
In 1954, Sam Phillips asked Elvis to record That's All Right. A local radio station played it, and listeners kept calling in asking, who is that singer? Elvis started getting attention around Memphis, but not everyone believed in him.
Together with Scotty Moore and Bill Black, they woodshedded for hours and days and months in the studio, and finally came up with a record called That's All Right, Mom. When Dewey Phillips played it on WHBQ here in Memphis on his Red Hot and Blue show, that was it. People went berserk.
That's All Right, Mama was a hit in Memphis, Tennessee overnight. When I got on the road to try to convince the people that we hopefully had something a little different, it was a little different story.
Later that year, Elvis performed once at the Grand Ole Opry. After the show, the manager, Jimmy Denny, told him, "You ain't going nowhere, son. You ought to go back to driving a truck." Elvis felt crushed. He was embarrassed and discouraged, but he didn't quit. He went back to work, kept practicing, and kept performing anywhere he could. In 1955, Elvis signed a record deal with RCA Records. In 1956, his song Heartbreak Hotel hit #1. That was the turning point. Elvis became famous across the country. His voice, his style, energy changed music forever.
For more than 2 decades, his magic created excitement wherever he went. Elvis was a simple man whose life became complex. He was the king of rock and roll.
He went on to sell over 1 billion records and became known as the king of rock and roll. Elvis once said, "There's a lot of people saying a lot of things, but in the end, you gotta listen to yourself."
A lot of people saying a lot of things, but in the end, you gotta listen to yourself.
Believe in your dreams before anyone else does. People will talk. Keep listening to yourself. The truck driver with a dream. Elvis Presley was told to go back to driving a truck. He was a young man with big dreams. He was standing on the most famous stage in country music. He was told he had absolutely no talent. This is a story of how a poor kid from Mississippi built a $1 billion business empire. It's a story about hard work and massive belief. Most people see the famous singer in the white suit. They do not see the lonely kid practicing in his room. They do not see the teenager working long hours. They do not see the entrepreneur who changed the music industry forever. The guitar that changed everything. Elvis grew up in Tupelo, Mississippi. His family was extremely poor. They lived in a tiny house with only 2 rooms. Money was a constant problem. His father struggled to find steady work. They often had to borrow money just to buy food. When Elvis turned 10 years old, he wanted a bicycle for his birthday. His parents did not have the money for a bike, so his mother bought him a guitar instead. The guitar cost $12.95 at a local hardware store. Now, at first, Elvis didn't even want the guitar. He was a very shy boy. He did not like people looking at him, but he started playing the instrument every single day. He practiced in his small room. He sang quietly to himself so nobody would hear. That small piece of wooden string became his escape from poverty. It gave him hope for a better life. Now, he didn't have teachers. He taught himself by listening to the radio. He played until his fingers hurt. He built a foundation of skill when nobody was watching. Finding the sound. As he grew up, music was everywhere in his environment. He heard gospel songs at the local church. He heard blues music playing on the radio. He heard country songs being played on the street corners. He paid close attention to all of it. He took all these different sounds and mixed them together in his head. He was doing his market research without even knowing it. He was learning what made people tap their feet. He was learning what made people feel emotion. And after high school, Elvis had to get a job. His family still needed money. so he got a job driving a truck for the Crown Electric Company in Memphis, Tennessee. He made $1.25 an hour. He drove around the city delivering supplies, and it was hard physical work. The days were long and exhausting, but he never stopped singing. He sang loudly in his truck. He practiced controlling his voice while he drove. He used his working hours to get better at his craft. He did not let his regular day job stop his massive dream. The $4 investment. In the summer of 1953, Elvis decided to make a bold move. He walked into the Memphis recording studio. This building later became the famous Sun Records. He had exactly $4 in his pocket. He wanted to record 2 songs on a small plastic record. The songs were called My Happiness and That Is When Your Heartache Begins. He told the person at the desk he wanted to make a record as a gift for his mother. But deep down, he also wanted to be heard by professionals. He wanted someone in the music business to notice his talent. The owner of the studio was Sam Phillips. Sam was not there on that specific day. His assistant, Marion Kiesker, was running the record equipment. She recorded Elvis singing. She heard something very special and different in his voice. She wrote down his name on a piece of paper. She made a note that he was a good singer. She kept his name on file. Elvis took his record home and went back to driving his truck. The first taste of success. A full year passed. Elvis kept working his job. Finally, Sam Phillips called Elvis back to the studio. He wanted to see what the young truck driver could do. Sam paired Elvis with 2 local musicians. They played music for hours in the small room. Nothing sounded very good. They were all getting tired. They were just about to pack up and go home. Then, during a short break, Elvis picked up his guitar. He started playing an old blues song called That Is All Right. He played it very fast. He jumped around the room. He added a completely new rhythm to the song. The other 2 musicians joined in with him. Sam Phillips heard the energy and immediately hit the record button. Sam took the fresh record to a local radio station. He asked the DJ to play it on the air. The DJ played the song. Immediately, the radio station phone lines lit up. People kept calling the station. They wanted to know the name of the singer. They demanded the DJ play the song again. The DJ played that single song 14 times in one night. Elvis finally had his first small win in the market. The ultimate rejection. But success is never a straight line up, right? It is full of hard drops. Later in 1954, Elvis got a chance to perform at the Grand Ole Opry. The Opry was the absolute biggest and most important country music show in the world. Getting on that stage was a massive opportunity. So Elvis drove to Nashville. He went on the famous stage. He sang his heart out for the audience. The crowd did not like his performance. They thought he was too different. The manager of the Grand Ole Opry was a powerful man named Jimmy Denny. After the show, Jimmy Denny walked right up to Elvis. He looked at the young singer. He said, "You ain't going nowhere, son. You ought to go back to driving a truck." The choice to keep going. Elvis was completely crushed by these words. He cried on the long drive back to Memphis. He felt like a total failure. The most important man in the business told him he was worthless. Elvis had a very serious choice to make. He could listen to the manager and quit the business forever, or he could listen to his own heart and keep working. He chose to keep going forward. He went back to his hometown. He kept practicing his guitar. He kept performing at tiny, dirty clubs for very little money. He simply refused to give up on his vision. He knew his value even when the experts did not see it yet. Building the image. Elvis realized he needed to stand out from the crowd. He could not just be a good singer. He had to become a full entertainer. He started shopping at stores that sold very bright and flashy clothes. He styled his hair tall. He dyed his hair completely black because he thought it looked better on camera and on stage. He started moving his body wildly when he sang. People had never seen anything like this before. Some people loved his energy. Some people hated his movements, but absolutely everyone was talking about him. He clearly understood the raw power of human attention. So in any business, attention is the most valuable asset that you can collect. If people do not know you exist, they cannot buy your product. Elvis made sure everyone in the country knew his name. By 1955, his contract was sold to the giant RCA Records company for $35,000. It was the highest price ever paid for a musical artist at that time. Now, RCA had the corporate money and the marketing power to put Elvis on a national stage. He was no longer just a local singer. He was becoming a major corporate brand. The power of television. Elvis and his new management team completely changed how the music business operated. They did not just sell vinyl records to teenagers, they sold an entire lifestyle brand. In 1956, Elvis went on national television. Television was still a very new technology. Many old singers did not trust television. Elvis embraced it fully. He performed on the famous Ed Sullivan Show. Over 60 million people watched his performance that night. That massive number represented over 80% of the entire television viewing audience in America. He reached millions of new customers in a single night. He did not have to drive from town to town to find them. He used modern technology to deliver his product directly into their living rooms. The merchandise empire. After conquering television, they started selling merchandise. They treated the Elvis name like a powerful trademark. They put his face and name on absolutely everything that they could manufacture. They sold Elvis shirts. They sold Elvis lipstick for girls. They sold Elvis record players. They sold Elvis hats and lunchboxes. In the year 1956 alone, official Elvis merchandise sales generated over $22 million. This massive success proved that a musical artist could be a diversified business empire. He wasn't just making money from singing, he was building a global brand that created multiple streams of income for him. He was the product, the marketing team, and the CEO all at the same time. The Hollywood strategy. So next, Elvis expanded his brand into the movie business. He knew that movies reached a completely different global audience. Movies also paid very high salaries, so he signed massive contracts to make multiple Hollywood movies every single year. His manager negotiated incredible business deals where Elvis received a huge percentage of the box office profits. Now, many film critics said the movies were not great art. The plots were very simple, but the movies were absolutely great business. They kept his face in movie theaters all over the entire world. They allowed him to sell millions of soundtrack albums. Every single movie was basically a giant 2-hour commercial for his music. He used one industry to feed another industry. Losing the fire. However, success can sometimes make you comfortable. By the late 1960s, the music market changed dramatically. New rock bands like the Beatles and the Rolling Stones were taking over the radio. Elvis had spent many years trapped in Hollywood making silly movies. He had stopped performing live music for his fans. People started to forget how great he was on a real stage. His record sales started to drop. He was losing his position in the market. He needed to pivot fast. In business, if you do not adapt to your changing market, your business will die. The great pivot. So Elvis realized he had lost control of his own product. He wanted to get back to his roots. He wanted to feel the energy of a live crowd again. He made a very risky business decision. He decided to do a live television special to prove he was still the absolute best in the world. He had to show everyone he was not just a movie actor. The Comeback Special. In 1968, Elvis filmed this television special. It is now called the 1968 Comeback Special. He dressed in a cool black leather suit. He looked dangerous and energetic again. He sat in a small circle with his old bandmates. He played his electric guitar and sang with raw, authentic power. He completely reminded the whole world who he was and why he was famous. The television show was a massive critical and financial hit. It became the highest rated TV show of the entire year. He successfully saved his own brand. He took back his power by returning to the core product that made him successful in the first place. He stopped trying to be what Hollywood wanted. He went back to being Elvis. Inventing the Las Vegas model. After the massive success of the Comeback Special, Elvis changed the live music business model again. He was tired of traveling on buses and airplanes. He stopped touring the country. Instead, he made his fans travel to see him. He signed a massive record-breaking deal to perform exclusively at the International Hotel in Las Vegas, Nevada. Before Elvis arrived, Las Vegas was mostly a place for older, fading singers. It was considered the place where music careers quietly went to die. Elvis completely changed that perception. He turned that city into a money-making machine for rock music. He performed 2 full shows every single day for weeks at a time. He sold out every single seat for every single show. Over 2.5 million people traveled to Las Vegas just to see him perform. He proved to the entertainment industry that a long residency could be highly profitable. He created a brand new way for artists to make millions of dollars without traveling. Today, giant music stars like Adele and Lady Gaga use this exact same business model. Elvis invented the modern residency. He saw a massive opportunity in a city where others only saw a dead end. the work ethic behind the king. Now, none of this massive success happened by accident. It happened because Elvis had an incredible work ethic. He worked harder than anyone else in the room. He recorded hundreds of songs. He starred in over 30 feature films. He performed thousands of live concerts. He pushed his body and his voice to the absolute limit. He was constantly studying the entertainment market. He watched other performers. He studied lighting and stage design. He involved himself in the production of his records. He was not just a passive singer reading a script. He was the primary architect of his own massive success. He understood that natural talent is never enough. You have to combine talent with a relentless, unstoppable level of hard work. You have to show up every single day and deliver value to your audience. The final lesson. Elvis Presley eventually sold over 1 billion records worldwide. He officially became the best-selling solo artist in the entire history of recorded music. His name is known in every single country on earth. His face is recognized by billions of people. But you must remember where his story started. He started as a poor kid with a cheap guitar. He started as a tire truck driver making barely over $1 an hour. He was told by industry experts that he had no talent. He was told to give up and go back to driving a truck. He achieved global greatness because he flatly refused to listen to the doubters. He trusted his unique vision when nobody else understood it. He put in the hard work in the dark. He continuously adapted his business when the market shifted. He built a brand that easily outlived him. Elvis once said a very powerful quote. He said, "Values are like fingerprints. Nobody's are the same, but you leave them all over everything you do." That is the ultimate lesson of his life. You have to leave your unique fingerprint on the world. You can't just copy somebody else and expect to be a legend. You have to find your own voice. You have to build your own path. You have to believe in your massive dream long before anyone else does. The world will always tell you to go back to driving the truck. The world will always tell you to play it safe. You must block out that noise. Keep pushing forward, keep building your empire brick by brick, and trust your own value. Ed Sheeran had no record deal, no money, and no backup plan. He played on the streets, in tiny pubs, even on the subway, and some nights he had nowhere to sleep but a train station. But he refused to quit. Now, he's one of the biggest artists in the world. Growing up, Ed was bullied for his stutter, his red hair, and his thick glasses. He didn't fit in. Music became his escape. At 16, he dropped out of school, packed his guitar, and moved to London alone. No money, no record deal, no safety net, just a dream. Every night he played tiny pubs, street corners, and open mics, sometimes to only 3 people in the audience. When the gigs paid nothing, he slept on sofas, on trains, even outside Buckingham Palace. Some nights he played his heart out and still went to bed hungry. Record labels ignored him. People told him to quit, but he kept writing, kept performing, kept believing. Then, in 2010, everything changed. He took a one-way ticket to LA, played an open mic, and Jamie Foxx saw his talent, inviting him to record in his studio and sleep at his house. That moment led to his big break. His independent music blew up online. Soon, he signed a record deal, dropped Plus, and the world finally saw what he always believed. He was meant for this. Now, 100 million records sold, Grammy Awards, stadiums packed worldwide. Ed had no money, no support, no excuses. Just belief, hustle, and a guitar. What about you? Are you making excuses or making it happen? A rough start, bullied and different. Ed Sheeran grew up feeling like an outsider. He was a shy, weird kid with thick glasses, bright red hair, and a bad stutter. Classmates picked on him relentlessly for how he talked, how he looked, everything. He once said, "I wore big glasses, had hearing problems, had a stutter, and I had ginger hair." Not exactly a recipe for popularity at school. To escape the bullying, young Ed found solace in music. He started singing in the church choir at just 4 years old and learned guitar by 11. In his early teens, music had become his safe space, a place to express himself when words failed. In fact, music literally helped cure Ed's stutter. At age 9, he memorized Eminem's fast rap album, the Marshall Mathers LP, front to back, and rapping along helped him stop stuttering. The very things that made him different, his voice, his creativity, his quirks, would one day become his superpowers. But back then, Ed just knew that music was his passion. He wrote songs in high school and performed wherever he could. At 11, he nervously played his first real gig, singing Eric Clapton's Layla at a youth show. That little taste of performing lit a fire inside him. He didn't fit in at school, but on stage, with a guitar, Ed felt at home. He dreamed of making it big as a musician, even when almost no one else believed in him. No plan B. All in on a dream. At 16, Ed made a bold decision that shaped his future. He dropped out of school and moved to London alone to pursue music full time. No college, no day job, just gig after gig in the big city. This is a huge leap of faith for him. He had no record deal, no connections, no safety net to catch him if he fell. But that was exactly how Ed wanted it. He never had a plan B. In his mind, if you have a backup plan, you'll use it when things get tough. So he didn't give himself that option. There's no plan B. This has to work, was his mindset. By removing this safety net, Ed forced himself to give 100% to plan A, making it in music. It was a do or die gamble on himself. Now, London was intimidating for a teenager from a small town. Ed arrived with basically nothing, just his guitar, a few songs, and a head full of dreams. He crashed on couches of any friends or acquaintances who'd have him, and when he ran out of couches, he got creative. He knew which late night subway lines he could ride to stay warm until morning. And he discovered an archway near Buckingham Palace with a warm air vent where he could curl up for a night. He later admitted he was technically homeless for about 2.5 years from 2008 through 2010, but Ed tried not to see it that way. He was just home less than I'd like to be, as he wrote in one song. He kept reminding himself that it was all temporary, a part of the journey. Now, during this period, Ed had to grow up fast. By day, he would scribble lyrics in his notebook or record rough demos, and by night, he'd haul his little acoustic guitar to any pub, club, or street corner that would let him play. He often performed multiple gigs a day, hustling across London with his guitar on his back. The audiences were usually pretty tiny, sometimes just a handful of indifferent drinkers in a pub or a few passers-by on the street. Once, Ed played an open mic where literally only one person was in the crowd, but he played his heart out for that one person as if it was a packed arena. And every single day was an opportunity to get better. Rejection? He faced it constantly. Most record labels and industry people completely ignored him in those early days. Now, many artists would have gotten discouraged, but Ed used that as motivation to improve. He set crazy work goals for himself. So, for example, in 2009, he played over 300 live shows. Almost every day of the year, he did a gig. He read that singer James Morrison got a record deal after doing 200 shows in a year. So Ed thought, I'll do 300. No was not an acceptable answer. He was determined to outwork everyone. Practice makes progress. And Ed was essentially living a 10,000-hour rule, performing nonstop to hone his craft. My songs are terrible, but I got it out of me. The more you write, the better they'll get, Ed has said, comparing songwriting to letting dirty water flow from a faucet until it runs clear. Every rough gig and every bad song he wrote was bringing him closer to the hit songs that were inside of him. Playing for peanuts. Gigs, grit, and growth. So Ed's life in his late teens was anything but glamorous. He'd lug his gear to open mics where he might get paid in beer or not paid at all. He slept on floors and sofas of kind strangers or fellow musicians when he could. But when he couldn't, it was the train or the outdoors. He went without regular meals or showers. I didn't have the best personal hygiene at that point, he admitted, because it was basically play, sweat, crash, and repeat each day. Yet through all this, Ed never saw himself as a failure. He truly believed he was paying his dues and that his big break would come if he just kept going. And importantly, Ed kept writing new music constantly. In between gigs, he recorded homemade EPs and sold them independently. He wasn't waiting for a record label to hand him an opportunity. He was creating his own. And in 2010, he released an EP called Loose Change, which featured a song, The A-Team, that he wrote after performing at a homeless shelter. He had been struck by the struggles of a young woman that he met there. Ed would later say that many of his first performances were at homeless shelters, and those experiences inspired some of his most heartfelt songs. Even as he was living through his own hardships, Ed was turning pain into art. Storytelling and empathy became part of his signature songwriting, qualities that would set him apart from the pack. Slowly but surely, Ed Sheeran was improving. His vocals got stronger, his guitar skills sharper, and his stage presence a little more confident. He was also developing a unique style, using a loop pedal to layer his voice and guitar live, effectively becoming a one-man band. So crowds of 5 turned into 10, then 50. He built a tiny fan base, listener by listener. These few fans were fiercely supportive, buying his self-made CDs and spreading the word about this red-haired kid who could sing and rap and hold an audience spellbound with just an acoustic guitar. Ed's hustle was beginning to pay off in little ways, but the big breakthrough still felt elusive and far away. By the end of 2010, after years of grinding, he was still an unsigned artist living on scraps. Most people, they would have given up. Ed almost did. but he didn't. The turning point, one shot in LA. So in early 2010, frustrated with his stagnation in England, Ed took a huge risk. He spent basically the last of his savings on a one-way ticket to Los Angeles. It sounds crazy. He had no contacts in LA, no shows booked, nothing. But Ed had heard that open mic nights in LA could lead to big opportunities. So he went, entirely alone, sleeping on couches in LA just like he had in London. Night after night, he lugged his trusty guitar to any club or cafe that held an open mic, signing up to perform among dozens of other hopefuls. He was just another unknown ginger-haired kid strumming for a distracted crowd. Until one fateful night. That night, Ed played at a popular open mic event in the city. Little did he know, Hollywood actor and music lover Jamie Foxx was in the audience. Jamie Foxx had a keen eye and ear for talent, and Ed's raw musical fire caught his attention immediately. He was this pale British kid, pouring his soul into original songs, rapping and singing with incredible skill. After Ed's set, Jamie Foxx approached him. Imagine Ed's shock. Foxx invited Ed to his radio show, The Foxhole, and had him perform live on air, which introduced Ed to a whole new audience. Even more amazingly, Jamie Foxx was so impressed that he offered Ed the use of his personal recording studio to cut some tracks and let Ed crash at his house during that time. For the first time, someone with industry clout was saying, "You've got this. Let me help you." Ed's long night of struggle was finally seeing a dawn. Ed returned to London with renewed confidence and a small but crucial foothold in the industry. In January 2011, he independently released one more EP, Number 5 Collaborations Project, featuring guest spots from underground rappers that he admired. To everyone's surprise, that EP blew up online. It reached number 2 on the iTunes chart with no label backing at all, selling thousands of copies in its first week. The music industry took notice, big notice. Ed had built a following on his own, and now the labels were calling him. And in a poetic twist, after years of rejection, Ed Sheeran suddenly had a bidding war on his hands. He signed a record deal with Atlantic Records in 2011. The scrappy kid who had been ignored by every label finally had the machine behind him to amplify what he'd been doing all along. Ed was ready for the world, and now the world was ready for Ed. Breakout success, the world listens. Ed wasted no time. In September 2011, at age 20, he released his debut studio album, Plus, under a major label. It was an album full of songs reflecting his journey, heartfelt ballads, up-tempo tracks blending pop, folk, and hip-hop influences. The lead single, The A-Team, a gentle song about a homeless girl's struggle, showcased Ed's songwriting and soulful voice. It struck a chord globally. The A-Team became a top 10 hit in many countries and earned Ed his first Grammy nomination for Song of the Year. Not bad for a song he wrote while couch surfing. The Plus album itself shot to number 1 in the UK and broke into the top 5 in the US, eventually selling millions of copies. Songs like Lego House and Gimme Love turned casual listeners into diehard fans. After so many years of playing for tiny crowds, Ed suddenly found thousands of people singing along to his lyrics. He had gone from sleeping outside Buckingham Palace to performing for the Queen of England, literally. In 2012, Ed was invited to perform at the Queen's Diamonds Jubilee concert. And at the 2013 Grammy Awards, Elton John, one of Ed's early heroes, joined him on stage to duet the A-Team in front of a worldwide audience. Try to picture that moment from Ed's eyes. Just 2 years prior, he was unknown and unsigned, and now he's trading lines with Sir Elton John at the Grammys. It was a powerful validation that all those lonely nights and all those gritty days, they'd been worth it. But Ed was just getting started. Instead of resting after his first taste of success, he worked even harder. In 2012 to 2013, he toured constantly, including getting coveted spots as the opening act for Taylor Swift's arena tour. Night after night, Ed walked on stage with just his guitar in front of massive crowds who mostly didn't know him, and by the end of his set, he had won them over completely. He built his audience the same way he did in pubs, only now on a bigger scale. In 2014, Ed released his second album, Multiply, which exploded even bigger. It featured Thinking Out Loud, the love ballad that earned him 2 Grammy Awards and became a wedding playlist staple worldwide. By the mid-2010s, Ed Sheeran was a bona fide superstar, selling out arenas and stadiums everywhere that he went. Ed's third album, Divide, in 2017, broke streaming records and led to the highest grossing concert tour of all time. Think about that. The kid who played 300 small gigs in a year ended up staging a single tour that sold over 8 million tickets and earned more money than any tour in history. He was selling out London's Wembley Stadium for 3 nights in a row, the very same city where he once slept on the Circle Line train because he had nowhere else to go. Ed had transformed every setback into a stepping stone forward. And as he puts it, I have come out the other end and blossomed. Lessons from Ed's journey: grit, heart, and belief. So Ed Sheeran's rise from struggling busker to global icon is more than just a music success. It's a lesson that we can all learn from. He wasn't handed anything on a silver platter. He wasn't an overnight sensation. He was an over a decade sensation. His story proves that hard work beats talent when talent doesn't work hard. And research actually shows that what we accomplish depends more on our passion and perseverance than about our innate talent for that thing. Passion and perseverance. Ed had both in abundance. He poured thousands of hours into writing songs, performing nonstop to empty rooms, and improving his craft. And every time life said no, Ed's answer was, try me tomorrow. So what kept him going? First, love of the craft, right? Ed genuinely loves making music, and that sustained him more than fame or money ever could. Second, it was his belief. Like, he had a belief that he was meant to do this. Even when others doubted him, and many people did, Ed believed in his own vision. He turned insults and rejections into motivation. Remember how he was bullied as a kid? He took that pain and vowed to succeed in his own way. He once advised, embrace your quirks. The moment you stop trying to fit in, things will fit around you. So being yourself is your greatest strength. Ed's weirdness became his uniqueness. The very traits that bullies mocked him for, his voice, his appearance, his emotional openness, became what millions of fans now adore about him. Ed's journey also shows just the power of being resilient. He faced homelessness and hunger and loneliness and industry rejection for years. Any one of those could make people give up. But Ed kept writing another song, kept booking another gig, kept knocking on the next door. Psychologists have a word for this kind of perseverance: grit. And Ed's grit was off the charts. He didn't wait for opportunities, he created them, whether by playing 300 shows in a year or flying to LA on a whim to play open mics. He trusted the process. And most importantly, Ed never made excuses for why he couldn't succeed. He could have blamed the bullies or his lack of money or the record labels that all turned him down. Instead, he focused on what he could control: writing better songs, performing better on stage, and working harder than anyone else. No money? He played on street corners. No stage? He built his own audience online. No support? He leaned on his own drive. Ed once said in an interview that having a plan B can hold you back because if you have an escape route, you'll take it when things get tough. So he made music his only plan. It was a risky strategy, but that focus helped turn his dream into reality. And look at him now. Ed Sheeran's success isn't just measured in album sales or awards. It's in the millions of lives that he's touched with his music and his story. So he's proof that you can start with nothing but a dream and end up living that dream as long as you're willing to work for it and believe in it. His journey from sleeping in subway stations to performing on the world's biggest stages inspires entrepreneurs, artists, or really anyone with a big goal. So the takeaway: if you want something badly enough, put in the work and never quit. As Ed's story shows, perseverance and passion are a winning combination. Make it happen. Your turn. Ed Sheeran had no money, no privilege, no secret shortcut to success. What he had was his hustle, his heart, and his belief. He made his own opportunities through just sheer effort and refused to let his circumstances define him. So now what about you? Think of your own dreams while you consider Ed's journey. Are you making excuses or are you making it happen? And the next time you're feeling discouraged or thinking about giving up, remember Ed Sheeran, busking for coins in the cold, sleeping on a train, hearing no 100 times, and remember how he kept going. That persistence built the foundation of an empire, and your persistence can do the same for your dream. What would you do if you were homeless at 12, scrubbing toilets at 15, and rejected by everyone? Jim Carrey lived it, but he never stopped believing. Jim grew up in Canada in a hard-working family, but when his dad lost his job, everything fell apart. They lost their home and were forced to live in a van. At 15, Jim dropped out of school to help. He worked as a janitor, scrubbing toilets, mopping floors, anything to keep his family afloat. But while he was cleaning, he was dreaming. He knew he was meant for comedy. He practiced jokes in the mirror, did impressions, and finally got on stage. But his first stand-up gig, a disaster. No one laughed. He bombed. Hollywood rejected him. They said he was too weird, too over the top, too much. But Jim refused to quit. He kept grinding, kept pushing, and finally got his break on In Living Color. Then came Ace Ventura, The Mask, Dumb and Dumber, and overnight he became the biggest comedy star in the world. And here's the craziest part. Before making it, Jim wrote himself a $10 million check for acting services rendered and dated it 1995. In 1995, he got paid exactly $10 million for Dumb and Dumber. Jim Carrey was homeless, broke, and laughed off stage, but he never stopped believing. So what about you? Early life, laughter, and struggle. Jim Carrey was born in 1962 in Newmarket, Ontario, Canada, into a humble, hardworking family. Even as a child, Jim loved making people laugh. At age 8, he would practice making funny faces in the mirror, and by 10, he was so confident in his impersonations that he mailed a letter to Carol Burnett, hoping to be on her comedy show. Comedy was his passion from the start, but Jim's childhood wasn't all smiles and jokes. His family hit serious hardships in his early teens. When Jim was around 12 to 14 years old, his father, Percy, lost his job as an accountant. The sudden blow plunged the family into financial crisis. They even became homeless for a while, living out of a Volkswagen van because they couldn't afford a home. The van was so cramped that Jim and his brother had to sleep in a tent outside. To keep the family afloat, everyone had to pitch in. Jim took on a job as a janitor alongside his dad, cleaning floors and toilets at a factory after school. By the time he was 15, money was so tight that Jim quit school to work full-time and help his family make ends meet. He later said that if show business hadn't worked out, he might have ended up working at a steel mill in Ontario. That's how limited his options seemed back then. It was a tough, uncertain life for a teenager, mopping floors by night and dreaming of comedy stardom by day. Despite the overwhelming challenges, Jim never let go of his love for comedy. In whatever free time he could scrape together, he honed his act. He would stand in front of a mirror practicing goofy expressions and voice impressions, determined to turn his natural silliness into a ticket out of his hardship. His father, despite his own struggles, believed in Jim's talent and did what he could to support his son's dream. Percy Carey would even drive Jim to downtown Toronto to perform at comedy clubs, giving his son a shot on stage when Jim was just a teenager. The family situation was pretty dire, but those small moments on stage provided a spark of hope for young Jim. He knew making people laugh was what he was meant to do. All he needed was a chance and the courage to keep trying even when things went wrong. Chasing the comedy dream. Jim Carrey's first attempt at stand-up comedy didn't exactly go as planned. In 1977, 15-year-old Jim got up on stage at a Toronto comedy club for the very first time and bombed spectacularly. He had crafted an act full of standard celebrity impressions, the kind he had practiced at home, but the edgy club audience wasn't impressed. His debut was met with silence and awkward coughs rather than laughter. The experience devastated him. My impersonations bombed, which gave me doubts about this career path, Jim later recalled. For a moment, the teen who had so boldly dreamed of comedy stardom was shaken to his core. Was he really cut out for this? And for a while after the first show, Jim stepped back to regroup. He focused on polishing his material and waited for his family's situation to improve a bit. Eventually, things stabilized. His father found a modest job and the Carreys moved out of the van and into a house. With a roof over their head again, Jim was able to return to the stage. In 1979, at age 17, he mounted a comeback in the Toronto comedy scene. This time, he had a sharper act and a fearless attitude, and it paid off. He started to get some laughs, and soon Jim booked his first paid gig, a 20-minute spot at a local club for a small $20 fee. It wasn't much, but it was a start. Audiences were beginning to see the spark in the tall, rubber-faced kid from Ontario. Jim's confidence grew with each performance, and so did his reputation. By the early 1980s, he was becoming a well-known young comic in Canada, earning opening slots from more established comedians. One of those established stars took notice in a big way. Legendary comic Rodney Dangerfield saw Jim's act and was impressed by the lanky youngster's manic energy and impressions. In 1981, Dangerfield invited Jim Carrey to tour with him as an opening act. Imagine being 19 years old and hitting the road with one of the most famous comedians in the country. It was an incredible opportunity. Jim eagerly joined the tour, gaining exposure to American audiences for the first time. With Dangerfield's boost, he even got a foot in the door in Hollywood. He moved to Los Angeles in 1983 to try to break into the US show business. However, Hollywood wasn't ready to roll out the red carpet just yet. Jim faced rejection after rejection in those early LA years. He auditioned for NBC's Saturday Night Live, not once, not twice, but 3 times, and was turned down each time. One of those failed auditions was particularly bitter. Jim never even got to perform for Saturday Night Live's producer Lorne Michaels because some staff writers decided in advance that Michaels wouldn't like Carrey's wild style. He landed a starring role in a low-budget comedy film called Once Bitten in 1985 and a short-lived NBC sitcom The Duck Factory in 1984. But true true breakout success still eluded him. Casting agents and executives didn't know what to make of Jim Carrey. Some thought his rubber-faced, over-the-top slapstick was just too weird for movies or TV. At times, Jim must have felt like he was too much for Hollywood to handle. The big opportunities that he dreamed of were just out of reach, and the string of rejections could have easily broken his spirit. Yet through all of these setbacks, Jim refused to quit. He kept grinding, kept pushing his act, and kept showing up at comedy clubs night after night to refine his skills. He was a fixture at LA's Comedy Store and the improv circuit, determined to make his mark. Each no he heard only gave him more incentive to try harder. In his mind, he hadn't come this far, from cleaning factories in Ontario to almost getting on national TV, just to give up. Jim believed it was only a matter of time before his big break would come. And he was right. In the late 1980s, his persistence finally paid off in a big way, opening the door to the opportunity that would change his life. Breakthrough on In Living Color. Jim Carrey's first major breakthrough arrived on a TV sketch comedy series, but not the one he originally envisioned. Instead of Saturday Night Live, it was Fox's In Living Color that would catapult Jim to fame. In 1990, Carrey was cast as a regular on this edgy sketch show created by Keenan Ivory Wayans. He was the lone white comedian in a predominantly black cast, and his fearless, zany characters fit right into the show's bold style. Week after week, audiences laughed at Jim's scene-stealing sketches like the accident-prone Fire Marshal Bill with his twisted rubbery face, or the outrageously feminine bodybuilder Vera DeMilo. Finally, after years of struggling, Jim Carrey had found a platform that let his oddball talent shine. He spent 5 seasons on In Living Color from 1990 to 1994, becoming one of the show's breakout stars. Hollywood, it turned out, was ready for Jim Carrey after all. They just needed to see him in the right setting. Thanks to In Living Color, Carrey's name was starting to get noticed, but nothing could have prepared him for what happened next. In 1994, Jim leapt from TV fame to global superstardom in the blink of an eye. It all happened in one unbelievable year. In early 1994, he headlined a quirky detective comedy called Ace Ventura: Pet Detective. The film was low budget and the studio didn't have high expectations, but Jim's hilarious performance as the wacky pet detective caught lightning in a bottle. Ace Ventura became a surprise hit, and Jim's catchphrases, "already then," were suddenly everywhere. But he was just getting started. That summer, Jim co-starred in The Mask, a comic book fantasy where his character transforms into a manic, green-faced trickster. It was another box office smash, cementing Carrey's reputation for unmatched cartoonish energy. Then, as if two hit movies weren't enough, December 1994 saw the release of Dumb and Dumber, a buddy comedy pairing Carrey with Jeff Daniels. The film was yet another blockbuster, and Jim's portrayal of the sweet but dim-witted Lloyd Christmas had audiences laughing worldwide. 3 major movies in 1 year, each a box office success, turned Jim Carrey into the biggest comedy star on the planet. Virtually overnight, he went from a guy who couldn't get on Saturday Night Live to becoming a household name. Hollywood's attitude towards Jim Carrey flipped almost comically. The same too over-the-top comedian they had been hesitant to cast was now their most bankable funny man. In fact, after Ace Ventura and The Mask raked in cash, studios were desperate to secure Carrey's talents. In 1995, he negotiated a then unprecedented deal. Jim Carrey became the first comic actor to ever earn a $20 million salary for a single film with the dark comedy The Cable Guy. He had ascended to the very top of Hollywood's A-list in record time. But amongst all this whirlwind of success, something truly magical, almost unbelievable, was happening in Jim's life, something he had dreamed about years before. It's a story so crazy you'd think it was a Hollywood script, and it involved a simple piece of paper Jim kept in his wallet. The $10 million check, dreams into reality. One of the most legendary stories about Jim Carrey is a testament to the power of visualization and self-belief. Back in the 1980s, when Jim was still a struggling unknown in Los Angeles, he did something audacious. He wrote himself a check for $10 million. In 1985, a broken, hopeful Jim Carrey made out a personal check payable to himself for acting services rendered, post-dated exactly 10 years into the future. The memo line simply read, "For acting, payment for work he vowed to someday accomplish." He tucked that check in his wallet and carried it with him everywhere. At the time, $10 million might as well have been $1 billion to Jim. He was barely scraping by. But that check was his symbolic promise to himself that one day, somehow, he would be worth that much as an actor. It was a bold act of faith. Now, for years, the check just stayed in Jim's wallet, growing tattered as the date drew nearer. And then, incredibly, reality caught up with Jim's imagination. Just before Thanksgiving 1995, exactly as Jim had envisioned. He got news of a career-making payday. He learned that he was going to earn $10 million for starring in Dumb and Dumber. The dream written on that check had come true almost to the letter. Jim had gone from sleeping in a tent and scrubbing toilets to pulling down 8-figure paychecks doing what he loved. It was a stunning example of what unwavering belief and determination can achieve. Almost like the universe decided to wink at him and say, "You believed, and you did it." Jim never forgot the significance of that moment, especially the role his family played in his journey. When his father, Percy, passed away in 1994, Jim placed the now weathered $10 million check in his father's casket. It was a way of honoring the man who had always believed in him and shared his dream. "I put that check in the casket with my father because it was our dream together," Jim said. The story of the $10 million check has since become a Hollywood legend. It's a powerful reminder to dream big and believe in yourself even when circumstances look impossible. Jim Carrey's life is proof that sometimes the wildest dreams really do come true. Beyond laughter, reinvention, and reflection. By the late 1990s, Jim Carrey was at the absolute peak of comedic fame, but he wasn't content to stay in one box. He had conquered comedy. Now he wanted to prove he could truly act. So Jim took a sharp turn and started pursuing more serious dramatic roles. And once again, he found success against the odds. In 1998, he stunned critics and audiences with The Truman Show, playing a sincere insurance salesman who discovers his entire life is a scripted TV show. Carrey's performance was heartfelt and restrained, and it earned him a Golden Globe Award for Best Actor. The very next year, he transformed himself to play Andy Kaufman in Man on the Moon in 1999, another role that earned him critical acclaim and a Golden Globe. Suddenly, Jim Carrey wasn't just a goofy comedian, he was a respected actor capable of depth and nuance. He continued to mix it up in the 2000s, starring in films ranging from broad comedies from Bruce Almighty, Yes Man, to artful dramas like Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind in 2004, for which he received BAFTA and Golden Globe nominations. Time and again, Jim showed that he could defy expectations, reinventing himself and silencing the naysayers who once doubted his range. Yet, even as his career soared, Jim faced personal trials behind the scenes. The early fame came at a cost to his personal life. He went through 2 short-lived marriages in the 1990s and a series of very high-profile relationships that didn't work out. More profoundly, Jim battled periods of intense depression for many years. He's spoken openly about the fact that making millions of people laugh couldn't shield him from struggles with mental health and identity. After his explosive rise up, Jim had to grapple with the question, who am I, really, when I'm not Jim Carrey, the comedy star? In a candid moment, he admitted that Jim Carrey had become a character he was playing, a persona he felt people expected, which left him feeling empty. The realization pushed him to seek a deeper sense of self beyond the spotlight. Tragedy also struck Jim's life in a deeply personal way. His mother, who had been ill, passed away in 1991, just as Jim's career was taking off, and his father, his biggest supporter, died in 1994, right before Dumb and Dumber made Jim a $10 million man. Losing both parents so early was a heavy blow for Jim. In the years that followed, he also endured a very public tragedy when a former girlfriend died by suicide in 2015, leading to painful controversy and lawsuits, which were eventually dismissed. Through these hardships, Carrey gradually turned to spirituality and art as a way to heal and find meaning. He developed a passion for painting and sculpting and spending long hours in his art studio creating vivid, expressive works that surprised those who knew only his on-screen persona. In interviews and appearances, Jim's public demeanor began to change as well. He often spoke about deeper philosophical concepts, the illusion of fame, and the importance of the present moment. Some people found his behavior strange, but Jim explained that he was simply no longer interested in playing the Hollywood game or being who others expected him to be. After decades in the limelight, he sought authenticity and inner peace above all. In fact, one of Jim Carrey's most powerful public messages came during a 2014 commencement speech he gave to graduating students. He told a story about his father's influence that summed up everything he had learned from his own journey. Jim's father had played it safe. He'd abandoned his dream of becoming a comedian and took a steady job as an accountant to support the family. But that safe path ended abruptly when Percy was let go from his job, leading to the hardships that the Carreys endured afterwards. From this, Jim learned a lesson he never forgot, as he told the students, I learned many great lessons from my father, not the least of which is that you can fail at what you don't want, so you might as well take a chance on doing what you do want. So you might as well take a chance on doing what you love. In other words, life has no guarantees, so it's better to risk failure at something that truly matters to you. Hearing those words, it's easy to see how Jim's own life exemplifies that philosophy. He risked everything to chase his comedic dream, and though the road was rough, in the end, he achieved more than he ever imagined. Legacy of an unstoppable believer. Jim Carrey's journey from a homeless teen to Hollywood megastar is more than just a rags to riches tale. It shows resilience and authenticity and the power of belief. At every low point in his life, from living in a tent to bombing on stage, Jim found a way to keep his dream alive. He had an almost stubborn faith in his own destiny, scribbling down his wild ambitions on paper like that $10 million check and carrying them close to his heart. When others told him he was too strange, too over the top, or just too much, he didn't tone himself down to fit in. He turned himself up, refining his craft until the world caught up with his vision. And once the world did catch up, Jim still wasn't afraid to change and grow beyond the box he put himself in. He's given us countless laughs with his elastic face and physical comedy, but he's also moved us with performances of real emotional depth. Through successes and failures, he remained at his core that determined kid who just knew he was meant to make people laugh. Today, Jim Carrey has stepped back from making movies at the breakneck pace of his 1990s heyday. After decades of entertaining us, he's hinted at the possible retirement from acting and has become selective about new roles. He focuses much of his time on painting and writing and speaking about the insights he's gained in life. But his impact on pop culture and comedy is already immortal. A whole generation grew up idolizing his characters, from Ace Ventura's talking butt jokes to the mass wild dance numbers, and many of today's comedians cite Jim as a major inspiration. His commitment to his characters and his improvisational genius redefined big screen comedy in the 1990s. And beyond the laughs, Jim Carrey, the man, has inspired millions with his personal story of perseverance. So, what can we take away from Jim Carrey's incredible journey? First, never underestimate the power of belief and hard work. Jim literally envisioned his success years before it happened, but he didn't stop at wishful thinking. He put in the work day after day, whether anyone was watching or not. Second, embrace what makes you unique. The very traits that people mocked or rejected in Jim, his wild energy, his expressive style, became the foundation of his superstar success. He stayed true to himself and it paid off. And finally, remember that fame and fortune aren't the ultimate keys to happiness. Jim's later years taught him, and by extension teach all of us, that personal fulfillment comes from being true to yourself and doing what you love, not from chasing others' approval. As he wisely said, you can fail at doing what you don't want, so you might as well take a chance on what brings you joy. Jim Carrey was once a 12-year-old living in a van, a 15-year-old janitor scrubbing toilets, and a young comic who heard more no's than yeses. But he never stopped believing in his dream. Instead of giving up, he used every setback to push harder. That belief carried him through the darkest times and ultimately into the brightest spotlight. If Jim's story tells us anything, it's that no dream is too big, not when you're willing to work for it and believe in it with all your heart. So ask yourself, what dreams do you have, and are you willing to take a chance on them? Jim Carrey did, and he not only changed his own life, he brought laughter and inspiration to the whole world. And that might be the greatest success of all. So whatever your passion is, keep going and keep believing. Jim Carrey's incredible journey is living proof that sometimes life can go beyond your wildest dreams. After all, as Jim would say with that famous grin, alrighty then, go make it happen. Imagine growing up never knowing if there'd be food on the table. That was Tony Robbins' reality. He was born in 1960 and raised in a chaotic and abusive household. Tony was the oldest of three, often acting as a protector for his younger siblings. His mother, who he loved dearly, had a volatile temper and struggled with substance abuse. She married and divorced multiple times, which meant Tony had 4 different fathers come and go. There was constant instability. One day there might be dinner, the next day nothing. Often Tony was hungry, scared, and never certain what tomorrow would bring. One of Tony's lowest moments came as a teenager. The abuse at home escalated to the point where, at 17 years old, Tony's mother chased him out of the house with a knife. Think about that, a parent threatening your life. Tony knew he had to escape, so he left home and never returned, determined to find a better path. Overnight, he went from a turbulent home to no home at all. He had no college education, no money, and no support system waiting for him. To survive, Tony took a job as a janitor, earning about $40 a week. He also worked evenings moving people's belongings for extra cash. It was backbreaking work, but he did it with one thing in mind. This was not going to be how his story was to end. You think your early life is hard? Consider Tony's. By 17, he was essentially on his own, scrubbing floors at night just to eat. Yet in that hardship, Tony found an inner hunger. He describes that adversity by saying, "If my mom had been the mother I thought I wanted, I wouldn't be as driven. I wouldn't be as hungry. I probably wouldn't have cared about other people suffering as much as I do." In other words, the very pain that could have broken him fueled his drive instead. Psychology research actually backs this up. Individuals who face childhood trauma can develop remarkable resilience and creativity as coping mechanisms. One study found that people who experienced adversity in youth were more likely to become entrepreneurs, often because they learned to adapt and fight for a better life. Tony is living proof. His tough childhood lit a fire in him, a hunger to change his circumstances and to ensure no one around him would suffer the way he did. But Tony's early years weren't only filled with pain. There was one beautiful moment that planted a seed of purpose in his heart. One Thanksgiving, when Tony was 11 years old, his family was so broke they couldn't afford a meal. They expected a dinner of canned vegetables. Pretty depressing for the holiday. Then the doorbell rang. Young Tony opened it and saw a stranger standing there with bags of groceries. It was a complete surprise. They hadn't asked anyone for help. Tony yelled for his dad, ecstatic that they've got food. But Tony's father reacted with anger and pride, initially refusing the charity. The stranger gently persisted, saying, "This is a gift from someone who cares. Don't let your family starve because of your pride." Tony's dad finally accepted the groceries, but he left the family shortly after, overwhelmed by shame. For Tony, however, that day was transformational. We had no idea it was coming, and that simple act didn't just fill my plates, it filled my heart with hope. It showed me that strangers care. That single act of kindness lit a spark in Tony. He learned the power of giving. He often says the secret to living is giving, and he lives it. In fact, Tony made a lifelong promise to pay it forward. Through his Basket Brigade and Foundation, he's now delivered millions of meals to families in need on Thanksgiving all over the world. Think about that ripple effect. One stranger's generosity inspired a movement that has helped countless people. Science shows that giving to others doesn't just help the recipient, it boosts the giver's happiness as well. Studies have found that people who spend money on others report greater happiness than those who spend it on themselves. Tony felt that joy at 11 years old, and he built a philosophy around it. So here's a lesson. Your background might be chaotic. You might have every excuse to say, success isn't for me. But Tony's early life teaches a critical lesson. You can choose to let adversity fuel you instead of fool you. Instead of using his past as an excuse, Tony used it as a reason to be hungry for change, to care deeply about other people's pain, and to never settle for less than he could be. If he could make that choice amid so much turmoil, you can too. As Tony often reminds us, your past does not equal your future. In fact, sometimes your past becomes the fuel for an even brighter future. Tony's life began to change when he discovered something powerful. The right mentor can compress decades of learning into days. So picture this. 17-year-old Tony is cleaning floors by night and going to high school by day, desperate for a break. One weekend, he's helping a family friend move houses, that side hustle to earn a few extra bucks. Tony can't help but notice that his friend, who his dad used to call a loser, suddenly seems really successful. So Tony, bold kid that he is, straight up asks, "My dad said you used to be such a loser. How come you're so successful now?" If you can imagine, Tony's always had guts. The friend wasn't offended. Instead, he smiled and told Tony about a Jim Rohn seminar he'd attended. He said, "This man takes everything he's learned in 20, 30 years of life and pours it into like 4 hours. For Tony, that idea was electrifying. 4 hours to gain decades of wisdom, he needed to go. But the seminar ticket was around $35 to $40, basically a week's pay for Tony at the time. Think about being 17 and gambling an entire week's wage on a hunch that a seminar might change your life. Would you do it? Tony did. He says it was a big decision to spend all that money, but he went for it. And that choice right there was a turning point. Tony walked into Jim Rohn's seminar and was absolutely mesmerized. Jim Rohn was a renowned personal development speaker, wise, calm, and incredibly insightful. For Tony, it was like someone finally handed him the manual for a better life that he'd been searching for. Jim Rohn's teachings hit Tony like a ton of bricks, in a good way. One lesson in particular lit Tony up from the inside, Rohn said. Don't wish it was easier, wish you were better. Work harder on yourself than you do on your job. This was revelation. All Tony's life, he'd been working hard just to survive. But here was the idea that if he improved himself, he could change the world. Tony later reflected, Jim gave me a way of looking at life that allowed me to not ask life to be easier, but to ask that I be better. That mindset shift from blaming circumstances to building yourself was pure gold. Tony realized the secret to life was self-education and personal growth, and that if he developed skills and character, he'd always be able to help others succeed. Tony didn't just take notes at that seminar, he took action. By the end of the event, he had a burning question for Jim Rohn. How can I work for you? Now, Jim Rohn was a big deal. He had plenty of staff, but something about Tony's passion stood out. Jim saw a bit of his younger self in this kid full of drive. He gave Tony a chance to prove himself selling seminar tickets, and boy did Tony prove himself. At just 18 years old, Tony became the top salesman promoting Jim Rohn events. He was on fire, traveling city to city, convincing people to come hear Jim Rohn, basically evangelizing the message that had changed his own life. Then one day, Jim Rohn called young Tony into his office. He said, "Tony, I want to expand and I'm going to make you the owner of a branch office. You've earned it." Jim told Tony to choose any city, any team size, the sky's the limit. Tony was stunned. He had a dream of maybe becoming a manager someday, and here was his mentor handing him the keys. Tony, brimming with confidence, said he wanted an office in Beverly Hills with a team of 30 people. Quite an ask for a teenager. Jim essentially replied, "Great, it's yours. You start immediately." When Tony asked about his salary, Jim dropped another surprise. "You write it. You're in your own business now." Jim had set Tony up as an independent distributor, meaning Tony wasn't an employee anymore. He was an entrepreneur running his own show at 18. Talk about empowerment. Tony later said that was one of the greatest gifts Jim ever gave him, the chance to run a business and learn firsthand. He had no role models of entrepreneurs growing up, so Jim became that role model. Suddenly, Tony was running his own small business promoting seminars. He had to hire and motivate a team, manage logistics, and sell to keep that office alive. It was sink or swim, and Tony swam. He worked tirelessly, giving speeches around Los Angeles, filling rooms for Jim Rohn's talks. In those years, Tony not only honed his public speaking and sales skills, but he also learned a priceless lesson about business. The chokehold on the growth of any business is the psychology and skills of the leader, he says. In other words, a business can only grow as much as its leader does. Tony experienced that firsthand. When he doubted himself, sales would slip. When he was motivated and resourceful, sales would surge. So for you as an entrepreneur, this part of Tony's journey shows the incredible value of mentorship and self-education. Tony often cites a quote from his mentor: "If you want life to change, you have to change. If you want life to get better, you have to get better." Jim Rohn had condensed decades of wisdom into seminars that Tony soaked up in days, and Tony applied it immediately by working for Jim. This combination of learning and doing was explosive for Tony's growth. He literally went from janitor to running a Beverly Hills office in about a year because he found a mentor and showed up coachable. And Tony's not alone. A lot of successful people have a mentor. In fact, research shows that having a mentor dramatically improves your chances of success in business. One study found that 1/3 of successful entrepreneurs had a mentor or support network, whereas among entrepreneurs who failed, only 14% had mentorship. That's a huge difference. Think about it. 33% versus 14%. Success leaves clues. And one big clue is don't do it alone. Find someone who's achieved what you aspire to and learn from them. Tony's hunger for guidance didn't end with Jim Rohn. He kept seeking out experts to learn from NLP co-founder John Grinder, with whom Tony trained in neuro-linguistic programming in his early days, to modeling the best in every field he encountered. That's how he built his diverse skill set. So ask yourself, who can you learn from? Maybe you can't meet your heroes in person, but when you read their books, watch their talks, watch their YouTube videos, take their courses, Tony spent what little money he had on seminars and books rather than instant pleasures. It paid off massively. The key lesson here is invest in yourself. Tony invested time, money, and effort to improve his mindset and skills. At age 17, when most of his peers were just hanging out, you can do the same at any age. It might mean swallowing your pride and becoming a student again, but it's worth it. As Tony learned from Jim Rohn, work harder on yourself than anything else because your own growth is the engine for your success. Mentors and role models shortcut the learning curve, but you have to step up and do the work. Tony showed up, took notes, volunteered, asked questions. He was an active mentee, not a passive one. And because he was so coachable, mentors opened even more doors for him. So who is your Jim Rohn? And equally important, are you ready to be the kind of mentee that absorbs knowledge like a sponge and acts on it? When you do, you set yourself up for the kind of breakthrough Tony experienced. It's like hitting fast forward on your growth. Tony's trajectory from broke teen to budding businessman happened so fast because he leveraged mentorship and massive action. You can do this. Seek guidance, stay hungry to learn, and then get out there and implement what you learn. As Tony put it, success leaves clues. So find those clues from people who've walked the path and use them to blaze your trail. Equipped with new skills and unshakable drive, Tony Robbins set out to multiply his impact beyond working for someone else. By his early 20s, Tony had a vision of taking what he learned and spreading it to as many people as possible on his own terms. He often says he had no intention of becoming a businessman at first. He was just obsessed with finding solutions to help people improve their lives. But that obsession naturally led him into business ventures. Tony's first big solo success came from combining innovation with massive action. In the 1980s, he decided to share his strategies through a self-help book and audio program. At just 24 years old, Tony wrote Unlimited Power, a book that introduced his ideas on personal achievement. He also distilled his coaching into a 30-day audio program called Personal Power. But here's the kicker. Tony didn't rely on traditional methods to reach people. He went all in on infomercials, a cutting-edge move at the time. Those late-night TV spots where an energetic guy promises to change your life, Tony was that guy. And he was one of the first in the self-help industry to do it so effectively. It was a game changer. Tony's enthusiasm blasted through TV screens into millions of homes. His message that you have the power to change your life resonated widely. People from all walks of life started ordering his tapes and practicing his techniques. Tony's leap to television caused his career to explode. He said that 1 year in his early 20s, he made about $40,000. And the very next year after the infomercials hit, he made over $1 million. That's a 25x jump in income in 1 year. He was only about 25 years old and suddenly a self-made millionaire. And according to Tony, from that point on, he never earned less than $1 million a year again. Talk about an inflection point. By 26, Tony Robbins was not just making money, he was becoming famous. His youthful charisma and real results landed him interviews and a growing fan base. In the 1990s, Tony's companies hit over $50 million in annual revenue. And his influence kept expanding. He published Awaken the Giant Within in 1991, which became a classic in the genre, inspiring entrepreneurs and leaders worldwide to adopt empowering beliefs and habits. That book is still on many CEOs' must-read lists. By the early 2000s, Tony's success allowed him to invest and partner in numerous businesses. It's reported by the 2000s his enterprises were bringing in more than $30 million in yearly profits, and he was just getting started. Tony has a natural instinct for business strategy. Even though he says he stumbled into being a business owner, once he got a taste, he became a student of business itself. Over the years, he ended up founding or partnering in dozens of companies. As of today, Tony Robbins is involved in more than 30 companies in industries ranging from education to hospitality to sports to finance, with a combined annual sales of around $5 billion. Yes, billion with a B. Some estimates even put his network of businesses higher. One source notes he's involved with 100 plus companies doing over $7 billion per year. But conservatively, the guy has an empire that most entrepreneurs can only dream of. What's remarkable is how Tony built that empire, by practicing what he preaches. He is constantly innovating and looking for ways to add value. As he puts it, the secret sauce in any business is to constantly add more value to your customers than anyone else. Do more for your customers than anyone else would ever expect. This philosophy made his early products stand out. They genuinely help people, creating raving fans, and it drives his companies today. He's been honored by business authorities. Accenture named him one of the top 50 business intellectuals in the world, and Harvard Business Press and American Express have called him one of the top business leaders and strategists. That's not bad for a kid without a college degree. Tony's reach also grew through his live events, those famous high-energy seminars like Unleash the Power Within with the Firewalk and Date with Destiny. He's literally spoken to millions of people in seminars across the globe for over 4 decades. You may have seen the Netflix documentary, I Am Not Your Guru, which gives a peek into how transformational his events can be. People walk in uncertain and walk out with a new lease on life. Tony's events often have thousands in attendance. At one event in Singapore, there were over 6,000 people in the crowd, all jumping, shouting, and making big life decisions together. Tony knows how to command a room, even a stadium, with his presence and energy. At these events, you'll see him bouncing on trampolines, giving bear hugs, intervening with individuals one-on-one, whatever it takes to help someone break through fear or pain. It's truly a spectacle and a deeply moving experience for attendees. He is a master at getting people into a peak state. Thousands attend his events to experience the energy and breakthroughs. Here in Singapore, over 6,000 people were on their feet as Tony took the stage. His ability to engage and uplift a room of this size shows how much impact one person can have when they bring passion and value. As Tony's reputation grew, entrepreneurs and leaders around the world sought out his coaching. He's worked with champions in every realm: athletes like Serena Williams and Wayne Gretzky, entertainers, and of course, business moguls. One famous example is Mark Benioff, the founder of Salesforce. In the 1990s, Benioff was a young, ambitious entrepreneur who attended Tony's seminar. He was so impressed that he asked Tony to mentor him. Tony agreed, and for years he advised Mark Benioff as Mark built Salesforce from a startup into a cloud computing giant. Benioff has often credited Tony's influence in helping him craft his vision and company culture. Tony's also been a coach and friend to Paul Tudor Jones II, one of the most successful hedge fund managers in the world. Tony has mentored him for over 24 years. When someone at the top of their field like Jones or Benioff keeps Tony around for decades, it tells you Tony delivers real value. He's known as the CEO whisperer, a behind-the-scenes advisor helping leaders sharpen their psychology and strategy. By helping the elite perform even better, Tony had a hand in countless innovations and deals that shape industries. At the same time, he's never lost touch with everyday entrepreneurs. His business mastery seminars are tailored to business owners, where he personally teaches what he's learned about scaling companies, marketing, finance, and leadership. He distilled these lessons into what he calls the 7 forces of business mastery, covering everything from creating an effective business map to world-class marketing to constant innovation. Entrepreneurs pay tens of thousands to attend his business programs because a single insight from Tony can transform their revenue or save their company. And often, it's not just technical know-how, it's the way Tony reframes their mindset that unleashes their next level. Tony's own business journey wasn't without challenges, by the way. He's had partnerships that didn't work out, economic downturns that hit his companies hard, even public criticism to navigate. But what makes Tony stand out is that he applies the same resilience to his businesses that he preaches to individuals. He will be the first to tell you that not everything he touched turned to gold immediately. He had to learn, pivot, and sometimes take hits. For example, when the 2008 financial crisis happened, Tony saw many people suffering and realized he himself needed to deepen his financial knowledge to help. That led him to spend years interviewing top investors and ultimately writing Money, Master the Game. In 2014, a book compiling financial wisdom for the average person. He donated all the profits of that book to charity, feeding people, of course, and simultaneously reestablished himself in an entirely new domain, personal finance, with huge success. That's Tony. See a need, immerse in learning, deliver value, repeat. By now, Tony Robbins has achieved a level of success and impact few ever will. But what's truly inspiring is how he did it, through relentless growth, passionate service, and absolute congruence with his teachings. He became a living example of the principles that he shares. It's one thing to give advice. It's another thing to embody it for decades. Tony does the latter. So here are some key takeaways from Tony's rise for you. Innovate and be willing to do things differently, like Tony did with infomercials before it was popular. Deliver massive value. Outwork and outcarry your competition when it comes to serving your customers. And perhaps, most importantly, scale your influence by empowering others. Tony went from one-on-one coaching to one-on-1,000 seminars to one-on millions via TV, books, and YouTube. In your business, think about how you can reach more people and serve at a higher level by leveraging media, technology, or a team. Tony's just one person, but through smart strategy, he's managed to touch the lives of millions of people. If he can go from literally zero to that, why can't you reach 10x or 100x more people than you currently do? That mindset shift from addition to multiplication is what separates good entrepreneurs from great ones. Finally, take notice that Tony's success always circles back to helping others. He became wildly successful because he obsessed over how to help people get what they want. As the Zig Ziglar quote goes, you will get all you want in life if you help enough other people get what they want. Tony is a prime example. Even now, in his 60s, he's constantly traveling, speaking, and contributing. He doesn't need to work another day financially. He chooses to because of his mission. When you build your business around a mission that truly helps people, you build something far more enduring and meaningful. Tony often says business is a spiritual game. It's about the soul you pour into it and the lives you touch. His life's work shows that making money and making a difference are not mutually exclusive. They're synergistic. So as you dream of your next level, ask, how can I serve? How can I solve problems for others in a way no one else is? Approach it with that give first mentality Tony has, and your success will be a byproduct of the genuine impact you create. So up to now, we've seen how Tony Robbins' mindset and strategies fueled his journey from broke to billions. Now let's switch gears and focus on you. What lessons from Tony's life and teachings can you apply to your own entrepreneurial journey right now? Tony's wisdom is vast, but I've distilled 4 core principles that come up again and again in his work, especially relevant to entrepreneurs. These are the mindsets and practices that Tony preaches and lives that can help take your business and life to the next level. Number 1, state is everything. Master your mind and emotions. Tony Robbins is big on this. Manage your state or your state will manage you. State means your emotional and psychological condition in any moment. As an entrepreneur, you're going to face crisis, doubts, long nights. How you respond is everything. Tony teaches that emotion is created by motion. Change your body and you change your mind. There's science behind this. Research has shown that adopting a confident, expansive posture, so-called power poses, for just 2 minutes can increase testosterone, which is the confidence hormone, and decrease cortisol, which is the stress hormone, making you feel more powerful and less stressed. In simple terms, stand tall, breathe deep, shoulders back, and you'll literally biochemically boost your confidence. Conversely, slouching and shallow breathing can make you feel weaker. Tony has intuitively taught this for years. At his events, before even tackling anyone's limiting beliefs, he often has them shake out their body and yell yes and adopt a posture of certainty. It might look silly, but it works by shifting the person's state. Tony also emphasizes the power of focus and meaning. What you focus on, you feel, he says. Two people can face the exact same failure. One focuses on the loss and feels defeated. The other focuses on the lesson and feels motivated. The habit of focus is a huge separator between those who get stuck and those who innovate through challenges. As an entrepreneur, you must become a master of meaning. Tony often illustrates this with a story from that Thanksgiving incident. He and his father made very different meanings of the same event. Tony focused on the fact that strangers cared enough to give and he felt grateful and inspired. His father focused on his failure to provide and he felt shame. Each of them had a radically different emotional experience because of their focus. So ask yourself, when you're in a tough spot, what else could this mean? That's a very Tony question. Didn't lend that investor? You could tell yourself it means your idea is worthless, cue the despair music, or you could decide it means you need to refine your pitch and find a better investor, cue the determination. Tony trains people to stand guard at the door of their mind, as his mentor Jim Rohn used to say. Don't let just any thought wander in and take control. You get to choose which thoughts to focus on and which to discard. Another aspect of state is your beliefs, especially the beliefs about yourself, which Tony calls your story. Tony says them bluntly, the only thing that's keeping you from getting what you want is the story you keep telling yourself. If you keep telling yourself, I'm new, I'm young, investors won't take me seriously, or I always mess up marketing, that story will sabotage you even if you have all the skills. Tony will challenge people hard on their limiting stories because he knows a disempowering story can paralyze even the brightest person. The flip side is also true. An empowering story can uplift an average person to do amazing things. Tony's own story could have been, I'm broken from a broken home, but he chose, I'm responsible for my life and I care about others' pain, so I will heal myself and help others heal too. What a story, right? And he's lived into it. So if you struggle with negative self-talk, here's a Tony-inspired exercise. Identify the limiting story you've been telling yourself, maybe about why you can't 10x your business, or why you can't find the right business partner, or whatever. Write it down. Then ask, what is this story costing me? Really feel that. Next, create a new story that is both true and empowering, something that gets you to take action. For example, I'm not experienced enough to, I'm resourceful and I can learn anything I need to. Tony swears by incantations, not just affirmations, but incantations, where you speak your new belief with total conviction using your body. It might be a bit out of your comfort zone, but speaking, I am unstoppable, I find solutions to every problem, while in a peak state, every morning can wire that belief in. Athletes do this, great speakers do this, and yes, Tony does this. He has a whole morning routine of breathing, movement, and incantations and prayer that he calls priming. So to sum it up, master your state, use your physiology, move, exercise, power poses, guard your focus, find the empowering meaning in every situation, and curate your beliefs. We need to start ditching the old story and adopt the new one that serves you. Tony's own daily energy and consistency of his performance over decades show how powerful this is. It's not that he never feels down or stressed, he's human, but he's trained himself to snap back to a peak state rapidly. As an entrepreneur, if you can do that, go from problem to solution-oriented in minutes, from fatigue to energized on command, you have a massive edge. Business is full of uncertainty. Controlling your internal environment is often the only thing you can control, and it makes all the difference. Number 2, raise your standards and take massive action. Tony Robbins is known for his high standards. He doesn't do things small or half-hearted, and he challenges others to step up their standards to achieve lasting change. One of his famous quotes is, anytime you sincerely want to make a change, the first thing you must do is raise your standards. What does that mean? It means stop accepting mediocrity from yourself. Identify what you've been settling for in your income, your health, your team's performance, and declare that it's no longer acceptable. Shoulds have to to become musts. Tony often says, if you should do something, you'll never do it. But when something is a must, you find a way. So turning your shoulds into musts is the essence of raising standards. For Tony personally, raising standards showed up early when he decided he must not remain in that small apartment, overweight and broke at age 19. So here's a quick backstory. After working with Jim Rohn, Tony went through a slump where he got physically out of shape and he was struggling. He tells a story that one day he looked in the mirror, he was fed up being 38 pounds overweight, and he punched the wall because he hated the standard he was living at. That day he made a must. He must change his body and his life. He went on to lose the weight by literally running at the beach every day with his dog and changing his diet. And more importantly, he never went back to that low standard. In your life or business, what have you been tolerating? Maybe it's tolerating a disorganized workplace or a toxic client or inconsistent marketing. Raising your standard could mean you set a new baseline. We will deliver projects on time, every time from now on. Or I will meet at least 5 new prospective customers each week, no excuses. When you set that standard, you then align your entire being to meet it. However, a standard without action is just an aspiration. This is where Tony's other trademark phrase comes in. Take massive, determined action. Massive action is the cure-all. Tony firmly believes almost anything can be solved or achieved with enough action. Not random action, but purposeful, consistent action. When Tony was starting those infomercials, he didn't just make one and cross his fingers. He flooded the airways. He tested different messages. He went big. Massive action doesn't mean reckless. It means all-in, persistent effort towards your goal, adjusting as needed, but never letting up. He often shares a simple formula. To achieve something, you must 1, decide what you want. Make it a must. 2, take massive action. 3, notice what's working or not, which he calls sensory acuity. And 4, change your approach until you get what you want, flexibility. That third and fourth part add nuance. Massive action is not just brute force, it's intelligence. If one approach isn't working, massive action also means massively changing strategies until it does work. Tony is like a heat-seeking missile, locked on target but consistently course-correcting based on feedback. For example, when COVID-19 hit hard and Tony could no longer do in-person events, his entire seminar business, a major part of his brand, was at risk. At first, it looked like a disaster, but he immediately took massive action to adapt. And within a few months, he and his team engineered a state-of-the-art virtual event studio with a 360-degree screen setup, bringing thousands of people together on Zoom in a way never done before. It was the largest Unleash the Power Within seminar in 40 years. He didn't do small webinars. He went full Tony Robbins scale, even in a new medium. The result, he ended up reaching even more people globally and kept the momentum alive. Entrepreneurs faced similar pivots in that time. Those who took massive, fast action thrived, while those who waited, unfortunately, faded. One more angle on massive action. Tony often says, the path to success is to take massive determined action, and he'll add, and keep changing your approach until you get there. It sounds obvious, but ask yourself, am I really taking massive action towards my top goal? Or am I kind of dabbling, just doing enough when it's convenient? If it's the latter, it's time to crank it up. Commit to making more calls in a day than you normally do. Code more hours, create more content, whatever is relevant for your business, and do it with consistency. Most people never hit their true potential because they never truly push that throttle to 100% and keep it there for a sustained period. Tony likes to use fitness metaphors, so going all out for a short time can produce more muscle growth than years of half-hearted workouts. The same in business. 1 year of massive focused effort can sometimes achieve what 5 years of normal effort would. Now, a caution. Massive action doesn't mean burnout. Tony is extremely mindful of managing his energy. He's known for his stamina, being on stage for 12 hours straight, but he also takes care of his health diligently with diets, cold plunges, etc. So as you raise your action levels, you also need to raise your standards of self-care so you can sustain it. The goal is peak performance, not running yourself into the ground. High standards apply to rest and recovery too. So to put this into practice, try this Tony-esque challenge. Write down one area in your business where you know you've been mediocre. Next, define a new standard that is your must in the next 90 days. Then list 3 massive actions you will take immediately to enforce that standard. As an example, our lead generation is weak becomes new standard. 100 qualified leads per month must be generated. Massive actions. Invest in hiring a marketing or agency this week. Personally reach out to 5 prospects every single day. Launch that referral program you've been postponing, and so on. By making it a must and backing it with massive action, you set in motion a momentum that is hard to stop. It's exactly how Tony launched new ventures or wrote books. He decided to write Money Master the Game and then interviewed 50 financial legends in record time. Massive action, massive research. Remember, dreams don't work unless you do. at scale. Tony became Tony by playing full out. He invites you to do the same because he knows that's when life gets exciting. And here's a motivator. Massive action tends to yield quicker results, which then motivate you into a further upward spiral. When you see progress, you get hungrier. So even if it's daunting, start that cycle. As Tony loves to say, take massive action and figure it out as you go. Waiting for perfection is just another form of procrastination. Number 3, embrace failure and learn continuously. If there's one thing that separates successful entrepreneurs from the rest, it's their relationship with failure. Tony Robbins has a very clear stance on this. There's no such thing as failure, only results. You've probably heard a version of that before, but Tony truly embodies it. In his experience coaching top performers, he found that fear of failure is the biggest obstacle that holds people back. Entrepreneurs who tiptoe around trying to avoid failure end up timid, stuck, and ironically, they fail by default because they never strive for greatness. Tony encourages a complete reframe of failure. Instead of seeing it as something negative, see it as feedback and as a stepping stone to success. Tony often shares that even in his own businesses, not every idea worked, not every seminar filled up in the early days, and not every investment paid off. But he didn't see these outcomes as permanent failures, just as data. He urges entrepreneurs to adopt what's called a growth mindset, a term that comes from psychologist Carol Dweck, the belief that skills and outcomes are not fixed and that you can improve through effort and learning. Tony's phrasing is, it's all learning. When something goes wrong, he doesn't waste time labeling himself as a failure or lamenting. He immediately asks, what can I learn from this? How can I use this? If a marketing campaign flops, that's valuable information on what your customers don't respond to. If a product launch underperforms, it's teaching you on what to improve. In a conversation about coachability, Tony said this, if you're trying anything new, failure will be constant. Those who don't fail will likely be swept up by someone more innovative. So you shouldn't fear failure because that just gets in your way. Instead, focus on learning more and more. Think about that. He's basically saying, if you're not failing regularly, you're probably not pushing hard enough or innovating enough, and someone else will pass you by. In today's fast-paced environment, constant adaptation is key, and adaptation comes from trying, from failing, from learning, and from adjusting. Tony's long-term client, Mark Benioff of Salesforce, is an interesting case. Benioff famously had a sign in Salesforce's office that said, get big fast or get eaten. That's massive action, but underlying it is the acceptance that you'll make mistakes as you move fast. You'll just correct them quickly. That's exactly how Tony runs things too. He often references a metaphor. When a rocket heads to the moon, it's off course like 90% of the time. The rocket constantly corrects its trajectory based on feedback until it reaches the destination. In the same way, your path to your goal will be off course most of the time, and that's okay if you are course correcting. Failure is just a signal to adjust, not a stop sign. So how do you put this into practice? Start by reframing the word failure itself. For your team, you might even ban the word failure and replace it with test or lesson. Encourage a culture where team members report not just their wins, but what they learned this week from experiments that did not go as expected. When something goes wrong, do a quick post-mortem. What did we learn? How can we use this? And then move on with that new wisdom. Also, examine your fear of failure. It's human to feel fear, but realize most fear of failure is actually fear of negative feelings or judgment. Tony would challenge you. What's bigger, your desire for success or your fear of embarrassment? If you truly raise your standards, point number 2, then you won't tolerate letting fear stop you. One trick Tony teaches to get over fear is to vividly imagine the consequences of not taking action. For instance, if you're afraid to launch your product, picture your company in 5 years if you keep waiting. Maybe you're out of cash, someone else stole the market, your dream evaporated. Really feel that pain. Then contrast it with the vision of success if you act. This leverage can make you say, screw it. I'd rather try and fail than never try and regret it. As Tony puts it, discipline weighs ounces, regrets weighs tons. He attributes that quote to Jim Rohn as well. You don't want the heavy weight of regret, so you take the lighter weight of disciplined action, which includes taking some lumps along the way. Here's another component, continuous learning. Tony is a learning machine. Despite being a teacher to millions, he's always a student himself. He reads voraciously, interviews experts, attends other seminars, and consumes research. He does this to be better for his clients and his companies. As an entrepreneur, the moment you think, I know it all, is the moment you're in trouble. Tony's mindset is KANAI, an acronym he uses: constant and never-ending improvement. Keep asking, how can we do better? What new skills do I need to acquire? Where is the market going? This humility and curiosity will keep you ahead. Tony also emphasizes learning from those who achieve what you want. We touched on mentorship. In business, he's learned from legends like investors Paul Tudor Jones, Sir Richard Branson, Steve Wynn, and so on by seeking them out. In a similar way, identify the giants in your field and learn everything you can about how they think and operate. The good news is, many have written books or done talks, made videos. You have access to a lot of their knowledge already. Let's not forget, Tony even learns from people he mentors. He said about coaching Paul Tudor Jones, "I'd be an idiot to think I'm only mentoring him. I'm constantly learning." That's the level of openness you want. Every interaction can teach you something if you're alert to it. So here's your action step. Do something that you might fail at on purpose. Launch that pilot program in a week, even if it isn't perfect. Call a big potential client you've been intimidated to approach, or publicly announce an ambitious goal to get some accountability. Do it with a mindset that whatever the result, you'll gain. If it succeeds, fantastic. If not, you'll learn why and improve. This muscles up your failure tolerance, and over time you become desensitized to the sting of failure and actually start to treat it like a scientist does an experiment, just part of the process. That is liberating, and it's exactly how Tony operates in his ventures and personal goals. In case you didn't know, he had a tumor in his brain. That was the cause of his growth spurt. That could have given him a great excuse to slow down or live carefully, but instead he treats every day as a gift to push harder. He's not afraid of what might go wrong. He's focused on making things go right. So in summary, embrace failure's lessons and commit to lifelong learning. When you do, failure loses its fangs and becomes a friend, a tough coach that makes you better. You'll start optimizing faster than others because you're willing to try more things. You'll iterate your product or business model to excellence while others are still drafting plans out of fear of getting it wrong. Tony's life is a testament to this principle. From each setback, he came back stronger because he squeezed the lesson out of it and left the rest behind. Do the same, and no failure will ever be final for you. It will be fuel. Number 4, serving greatly is the power of purpose and generosity. We've touched on this throughout Tony's story, but it deserves its own spotlight. Service and purpose. Tony Robbins' driving force isn't money, it's mission. He often says the secret to living is giving, and he's lived by that credo since that Thanksgiving when he was 11. For entrepreneurs, this translates to a powerful lesson. Make your business about more than just profits. Profits are necessary, but they are a means, not the end. The end is the impact, the contribution, the difference you make for your customers, employees, your community, and beyond. Tony's businesses all have a thread of purpose. Whether it's helping people transform their lives, providing clean water in India, which is one of his philanthropic projects, feeding the hungry, or educating people on finance so they can have dignity in retirement, there's always a why that's bigger than the what. This does two things. It motivates you and your team to go above and beyond. And it also endears your brand to customers on a deeper level. People sense when a company genuinely cares. In an age where consumers are savvy and values-driven, having an authentic mission is a huge competitive advantage aside from just being the right thing to do. Think about Tony's Basket Brigade tradition. As we talked about, he's helped provide millions of meals to families in need. He doesn't make a dime from that. In fact, he donates a ton of money and time to it, but it's part of the lifeblood of his organization. When employees or partners know the person at the top is that committed to giving back, it creates a culture of generosity and loyalty. Many entrepreneurs have followed suit, integrating philanthropy into their model from early on. Salesforce, for example, adopted a 1-to-1 model. So 1% equity, 1% product, 1% employee time donated to charity. But you don't have to wait until you're rich to start giving. Tony started feeding families when he was barely making any money himself. He set aside a portion because he remembered how one meal changed his family's life. He often says, if you won't give a dime out of $1, don't kid yourself you'll give $1 million out of $10 million. Start giving now, wherever you are. This resonates. It's about building that muscle of contribution early. For entrepreneurs, maybe you can donate a percentage of sales to a cause aligned with your business, or simply give your time and skills to help others in your network without expecting something in return. It might seem paradoxical, but giving actually opens doors to receiving in unexpected ways. Tony's massive network of influential friends is no accident. He's been helping people for decades, so naturally, so many people want to help him or get involved in his opportunities. Also, having a purpose can pull you through really tough times. When the challenges stack up and a purely financial goal might not keep you motivated, there's only so much pain you'll go through just for money. A higher purpose will. If your goal is to, say, revolutionize education for children or bring green energy to communities, that purpose becomes a well of strength when you encounter setbacks. Tony's purpose, originally to end suffering for himself and help end suffering for others, is like a nuclear reactor inside him. It keeps him going at an age where many would retire because he's not doing it for ego or cash. He truly wants to contribute until his last breath. When you tap into a purpose that gives you goosebumps, you become virtually unstoppable. Now let's talk practically. How can you infuse more purpose and service into your business? Start with your customer. Obsess over how you can genuinely improve their life or business. Tony's secret to building raving fans: do more for your customers than anyone else. Surprise them, over-deliver, add personal touches, follow up to ensure they got results. When people feel cared for, they not only stick around, they refer others enthusiastically. Tony's entire early business grew via word of mouth from people whose lives were changed. Even with all the marketing he did, it was the heartfelt referrals that cemented his brand. Also, consider a cause that resonates with you and your team. It should be something you authentically care about. Authenticity matters. Don't just pick a charity for PR. Maybe it's related to your industry, a tech company mentoring underprivileged kids in STEM, for example. Involve your team in giving back. It's hugely morale boosting. Studies have shown that workplaces that enable employees to volunteer or contribute have higher engagement and job satisfaction. It feels good to do good. A simple human truth backed by science. Tony often shares a beautiful insight. Success without fulfillment is the ultimate failure. You don't want to climb the ladder of success only to find it's leaning against the wrong wall. That you achieve success but feel empty because it lacked meaning. Fulfillment, he says, comes from growth and contribution. We've covered growth, continuous learning, etc., and contribution is the other side of that coin. So design your entrepreneurial journey such that you are growing and contributing along the way, not just at the end. There's also a bit of enlightened self-interest here. Generosity is a prosperity mindset. When you give freely, you're subconsciously telling yourself, I have plenty and there will always be more, which is an abundance mindset. Fearful people hoard. Successful people give and create. Tony's mentor Jim Rohn taught him the importance of giving even when you have little. It destroys the fear that you don't have enough. Ironically, that very act of giving tends to attract more wealth, maybe because you network with other givers, or you reinforce productive beliefs, or simply karma. Tony saw that play out in his life and in many of his wealthy friends' lives. On a day-to-day level, serving greatly can mean simply listening to people better. Tony is an excellent listener when he's coaching someone. He's fully present and focused on understanding them. As a leader, you could do the same with your employees or customers. Listen to their needs and pains. It's a huge act of service in a world where most people are too busy to truly listen. To really bring this home, remember the stat that I said before: 1/3 of successful entrepreneurs had a mentor or support group versus 14% of failed ones. This implies that successful ones were both receiving and likely giving support in networks. Humans succeed best cooperatively. Service is not only downwards like charity, but also sideways and upwards, helping peers, adding value before expecting something, mentoring others when you can. Tony still conducts free interventions on people in crowds, knowing not all of them can afford his coaching. It's a service, but also those moments often become testimonials that spread his legend, so it's a win-win. So here's an action reflection. Ask yourself, what is my company or my personal's ultimate purpose beyond making money? Why does what you do matter in the big picture? If you shut down today, who would cry, or what void would there be? If the answer is fuzzy, spend time to clarify your mission. Write it out, make it inspiring, share it with your team frequently. Let it guide your decision making. When facing a tough call, ask which option aligns more with your mission of service. And start giving in small ways now. It could be as simple as mentoring a younger entrepreneur over coffee once a week, or giving free access to your software to a nonprofit, or volunteering in your community. These acts keep you connected to humanity and prevent burnout by reminding you that your work has meaning. Tony's life demonstrates a beautiful paradox. By focusing on helping others, he himself achieved wealth and fulfillment. By believing in others, he strengthened his own belief. By giving love, he feels love constantly. The man is surrounded by gratitude from those who he's helped. In your entrepreneurial path, keep that spirit. It will make the journey joyful no matter what level of success you reach. And it ensures that when you do reach those victories, they're rich with meaning and pride, not hollow. Impact is the real scorecard that Tony cares about. And likely deep down, it's what we all care about. So we've journeyed through Tony Robbins' life from a kid in a tumultuous home to a towering figure of inspiration and distilled the lessons that entrepreneurs like you can harness. Now it boils down to this. What will you do with this knowledge? Tony often says a life can change in a moment, the moment you make a real decision. Maybe this is that moment for you. Tony's story shows that it doesn't matter where you start. You could have every disadvantage, every reason to play small, and still choose to play big. At 17, Tony made a decision to not be a victim of his circumstances. At various points, he decided to go all in on improving himself, to take risks on new ventures, to step up, to serve when others shrank back. Those decisions, backed by action, are why he is who he is today. And now it's your turn. You have something special inside you too. Your own giant within, as Tony would say, and it's time to awaken it. Think about the struggles you faced. Maybe tough childhood experiences, failures, rejection, self-doubt. Those can be your fuel if you let them. Tony used to keep reminders of his past hardships, like that empty Thanksgiving table, not to feel bad, but to remind him why he must keep growing and giving. What pain or injustice fires you up to create change? Embrace it and commit to being the solution. I want to end with a challenge. Channeling my inner Tony and Evan together. I challenge you to take one powerful action in the next 24 hours that will move you towards your dreams. Not next month, not someday, now. It could be a phone call to that mentor or expert you've been meaning to reach out to. It could be finally registering that business, filming that product demo, or even apologizing to someone you need to make things right with so you can move forward. Do something bold. Fortune favors the bold, and clarity comes from engagement, not thought. So engage and make that move. Remember, knowledge is worthless without execution. As Tony reminds us, the path to success is to take massive, determined action. You've got some new insights and motivation here. Don't let it fade. Leverage it immediately. Take a step that commits you, that maybe even scares you a bit. That's when you know you're growing. And when you take that action, carry Tony's core belief with you, that you are in control of your destiny. Yes, you, not your parents, not the economy, not the doubters. You get to write the story from here on out. If the old chapters weren't great, use Tony's techniques. Get grateful for them because they gave you the muscles. Then write the next chapters as the hero of the story, not the victim. Also, cultivate that mindset of absolute belief in yourself and your mission. Tony has an infectious certainty when he speaks. That certainty is a result of aligning his focus, physiology, beliefs, and habits all in one direction. You can do the same. Priming your mind each morning with empowering thoughts, visualizing your outcomes, remembering your purpose. Over time, that creates an unshakable belief. And when you believe in you, others can't help but believe in you too. So, what's the vision that pulls you? See it, feel it, and step into it today. Maybe you're the next great innovator in your field or the leader of a movement that changes your community. Why not? As Tony often says, why live an ordinary life when you can live an extraordinary one? The only limits are the ones you set up in your mind or the lack of imagination to see what's possible. So you've learned how Tony turned his pain into purpose, how he met mentors who ignited him, how he built an empire by providing insane value, how he mastered his mind and heart to keep growing, and how he never forgot that serving others is the highest calling. Take these lessons to heart, apply them. They work. They've been proven, not just by Tony, but by countless other successful entrepreneurs who follow similar principles of mindset, passion, and perseverance. In the end, success in business and in life isn't about avoiding mistakes or catching lucky breaks. It's about consistently showing up as your best self, learning and adapting and contributing to something meaningful. Tony Robbins turned his life around and has guided millions to do the same. He believes in the power of the individual, the power in you. And you know what? I do too. You have everything it takes to make your dream a reality, or to dream even bigger than you've allowed yourself before. Don't let anyone, especially that inner critic, tell you otherwise. Step up, take charge, and let your actions proclaim your faith in your mission. Do it, and your future self will thank you. Tony likes to end his talks with energy and a decisive call to action. So here it is. Decide who you are. Decide what you want, and go after it with all you've got. You can script a new story starting today, one of courage, growth, and impact. It's your life, and it's happening right now. So unleash your power. Live your passion, and remember, the only limit is the one you set for yourself. I'll leave you with one of Tony's favorite words, and mine. Believe. Soichiro Honda, the founder of Honda Motors, was rejected by Toyota, lost his factory in World War II, and had an earthquake destroy everything he built. He was broke, humiliated, and at rock bottom. But instead of giving up, he turned failure into the fuel for his greatest success. Honda was obsessed with engines. As a young man, he spent years designing a new piston, believing it would change the industry. He took his invention to Toyota, expecting them to buy it, but they rejected him, saying it wasn't good enough. Most people would have quit, but Honda went back, redesigned it, and tried again. Toyota rejected him a second time. He was crushed. He had put everything into this project, and now he had nothing to show for it. Still, he refused to quit. He borrowed money, built a factory, and started producing his own parts. Just when things were finally looking up, World War II hit. His factory was bombed twice. All his hard work gone. But he rebuilt. Then before he could recover, a massive earthquake struck and leveled everything he had left. Honda was left with nothing. No factory, no money, no hope. But instead of feeling sorry for himself, he found a new way forward. With Japan struggling after the war, people needed cheap transportation. He took a simple bicycle and attached a tiny motor to it. That small idea, it changed everything. People loved it. He started making more. Soon his little motorized bikes were selling all over Japan. That business became Honda Motors, which grew into the biggest motorcycle company in the world, and later, one of the most successful car manufacturers in history. Soichiro Honda was rejected, bankrupt, and lost everything, but he never stopped. If he had quit, there would be no Honda today. When life knocks you down, will you stay down, or will you rise up and build something even greater? You could say Soichiro Honda was born with grease under his nails. He entered the world in 1906 in a tiny Japanese village, the son of a blacksmith who also fixed bicycles. As a child, Soichiro helped his father's bike repair shop, mesmerized by gears and spokes instead of school books. In fact, he wasn't much for traditional education. He once forged his family seal out of a rubber bicycle pedal to fake his report card approval. It worked for Honda since his name was symmetrical, but not for his friends with different names. That little mischief got him caught, but it shows you something. Even as a kid, Soichiro was resourceful and bold, unafraid to hack the system to get what he wanted. What he wanted most was machines. As a toddler, he saw his first automobile roll through his village and he was spellbound. He said the oil smelled like perfume to him. He even borrowed his dad's bicycle to chase an airplane demonstration once. He was obsessed with anything mechanical. If you've ever felt that burning passion for something at a young age, you know how Soichiro felt. And if you haven't found your passion yet, take a cue from him. Follow your curiosity relentlessly. At 15 years old, armed with nothing but that passion, Soichiro left his village and headed to Tokyo to find work as a mechanic. Imagine a teenager with no formal education, no money, just a dream to work with cars. He saw an ad for a job at an auto shop called Art Shokai and wrote them a letter asking for an apprenticeship, even though they weren't advertising for one. Who does that? Someone hungry to learn. And it worked. They took him on. So ask yourself, would you have the guts to cold call your way into an opportunity? Honda did. That bold move at 15 set the foundation for everything to come. At Art Shokai in the 1920s, Soichiro thrived. He swept floors and fetched tools at first, but he soaked up knowledge like a sponge. He became a skilled mechanic known for clever fixes and crazy work ethic. His boss, Yuzo Sakakibara, was so impressed that he let young Honda help build a racing car from scratch. And get this, Soichiro built a race car with a salvaged engine that broke the speed record in Japan at the time, over 100 miles per hour. He even drove it in a race. That fearless need for speed was already in his blood. Unfortunately, in 1936, he crashed in a race and nearly died, injuring his eye. That crash ended his driving days, but not his racing spirit. We'll see how racing comes back into his story later on. By his early 30s, Soichiro Honda had learned all he could at the garage. He had a vision. He wanted to start his own company and make his own products. How many 30-year-olds do you know with a confidence to start a manufacturing business from scratch? This is where his real entrepreneurial journey kicks off. And trust me, it almost ended as soon as it began. In 1937, Soichiro Honda took the leap. He invested all of his savings, about $3,200, into a small factory to mass-produce piston rings, which were a critical engine part. He was betting everything on his ability to make a tiny piece of metal better than anyone else. His plan was to sell these piston rings to Toyota, the big car company. It did not go as planned. In fact, it was a disaster. After months of work, he delivered his first batch of piston rings to Toyota, and they rejected almost all of them. Imagine the moment. You've poured your heart, your soul, your life savings into a product, and the customer says, "These are junk." Out of 50 rings, only 3 met Toyota's quality standard. Another account says he made thousands of rings and only a few dozen were usable. Either way, almost 90 to 99% of his work was a failure. Can you imagine how crushing that could be? Honda was heartbroken and humiliated. He literally lost a Toyota contract, and with it, his hopes for a successful business seemed to crumble. Now, most people at this point would quit. They'd say, well, I tried, I failed, time to find a stable job. And here's where Soichiro Honda shows the mindset that you as an entrepreneur need to have. He refused to give up. Instead of quitting, he decided to learn from the failure and come back stronger. Remember this the next time you fail. Success represents the 1% of your work which results from the 99% that is called failure. Soichiro Honda said that, and he lived it. He understood that each failure was telling him something. In this case, it told him he needed more knowledge. So he went back to school, literally. Honda enrolled in a technical school to study metallurgy, the science of metals, so he could figure out why his piston rings were too brittle or too soft. By day, he ran his little factory. By night, he was hitting the books. For 2 years, he experimented, studied, and improved the manufacturing process. And it paid off. By 1939, he had mastered the process and his piston rings were finally good enough. Toyota gave him a contract and his factory began supplying piston rings not only to Toyota, but also to the Japanese military for aircraft. His business, Tokai Seiki, grew to employ over 2,000 workers at its peak. Think about that. He went from catastrophic failure to running a 2,000 employee company because he didn't quit. He treated failure as feedback, not finale. This is failing forward in action. What can you learn from here? Persistence. The science backs it up. Research from the University of Pennsylvania shows that grit, passion, and perseverance is a better predictor of success than talent or IQ. Soichiro Honda's grit pulled him through. He literally turned failure into fuel. He once said, instead of being afraid of the challenge and failure, be afraid of avoiding the challenge and doing nothing. In other words, the only real failure is not trying. Soichiro's piston ring venture finally found success, but just as things were looking up, the world turned upside down. War broke out. Soichiro Honda's company was humming along, supplying Toyota and others, but then World War II escalated. Japan was drawn into war, and by 1944, Soichiro's factory became a target. Bombs rained down, and an American B-29 air raid leveled his main plant to rubble. If that wasn't enough, in 1945, a massive earthquake struck Japan and destroyed his second factory. In less than a year, everything he'd built, years of effort, all that persistence was reduced to smoking ruins and twisted metal. Imagine standing in front of your business, the place you poured your sweat and blood into, and seeing it literally collapse in a pile. How would you feel? Most of us would be devastated. Soichiro Honda certainly was in shock. He later said he had no interest in rebuilding the piston ring business for a third time. And can you blame him? He'd been through failure, recovery, success, then utter destruction. This was rock bottom. So what did he do? He didn't immediately jump back into entrepreneurship. In fact, Honda sold the salvageable remains of his factory to Toyota for 450,000 yen, just to have something to start anew. Then he took a break. A really long break by his standards. He spent a year basically in reflection and recuperation. He even went back to college for a bit and studied engineering more, though he never did get a formal degree. Soichiro was now an engineer without a company, without a degree, and nearly without hope. But this wasn't where the story ends. Because remember, the day you stop dreaming is the day you die. And Soichiro Honda was not done dreaming. His homeland Japan was also in ruins from the war. And in those ruins, new opportunities were emerging. Necessity is the mother of invention, and Japan needed inventions. The people needed basic transportation to rebuild their lives in a shattered economy. Soichiro saw this need, and once again, he had a crazy idea. It's 1946. Japan is in chaos. Fuel is scarce, money is tight. People are literally rebuilding buildings and lives. Soichiro Honda, now 40 years old, is back in his hometown, figuring out his next move. One day he stumbles on a small two-stroke engine, a tiny surplus military generator motor left from the war, just lying around. Most folks would see a hunk of junk. Soichiro saw opportunity. He famously recalled that moment as a moment of destiny, the spark that would ignite Honda Motor Company. He thought, what if I attach this little engine to a bicycle? People had been tinkering with motorized bikes elsewhere, but in Japan it wasn't common. With gas in short supply, an efficient motorbike could be the perfect solution for easy transport. Soichiro got to work in his shack. He strapped the engine to a bicycle, used a hot water bottle as a makeshift fuel tank, seriously, and rigged a way to drive the wheel. The first prototype shook and rattled, but it worked. He gave it to his wife, Sachi, to test. She became the first test rider, putting up with oil splattering her clothes as she rode around town. People on the street must have thought they were seeing things. A woman cruising by without pedaling. And that was exactly Soichiro's plan. It got people talking. The little motorbike was loud, rough, and imperfect, but to war-weary citizens, it looked like freedom. Honda improved the design, and after his wife's feedback about the oil mess, and began building more. He had limited engines, about 500 of those surplus motors, so he refurbished every single one by hand before mounting it on a bicycle to sell. He refused to put out a shoddy product with his name on it. Even in desperate times, quality was king for him. That's a lesson. Your reputation is built on the quality you deliver, even when resources are scarce. Soon word spread about these motorized bicycles. They were cheap to run and helped people get around quickly. Buyers came from all over Japan to his hometown to get one. Soichiro Honda was back in business, not with piston rings this time, but with a whole new product born of necessity and imagination. By late 1946, Soichiro had officially founded the Honda Technical Research Institute, working out of a little wooden shack with a team of about a dozen men and a dream. That institute title is pretty grand for what basically was a glorified garage lab with an oil-stained floor. They worked day and night on improving a motorized bicycle. When the supply of surplus engines ran out, Honda knew they had to make their own engines to keep going. So in 1947, they developed a new 50cc engine, their first original Honda engine, and mounted it on a bicycle frame. This evolved into a complete motorbike known as the Type A, nicknamed the Bada Bada for the sound it made. It wasn't long before Honda's bikes were in demand across Japan. In 1948, just 2 years after starting from zero, Soichiro took the next big step. He incorporated Honda Motor Corporation as an official company. He knew he needed help to really grow, so he partnered with Takeo Fujisawa, a savvy businessman who joined him in 1949. This was crucial. Fujisawa handled the financial and marketing side, while Soichiro focused on engineering and production. Teamwork and knowing your strengths. This is another key entrepreneurial lesson. Honda was an engineering genius, but admittedly hated dealing with accounting. His wife would poke him about unpaid bills. By bringing in a partner who excelled in business, he freed himself to do what he loved most: innovate. So ask yourself, do you need a Fujisawa in your venture to complement your skills? With a solid team and a growing reputation, Honda Motor Co. took off. Soichiro and his engineers kept innovating new models. In 1949, they released the Type D Dream, Honda's first true motorcycle, complete with a sleek frame and 98cc engine. The name Dream says it all. It was Soichiro's dream becoming reality. But it wasn't easy. Post-war Japan was crawling with competition. About 200 other small companies were also making motorized bikes, all scrambling for a piece of a very poor market. Honda was just one player in a crowded field, an underdog by any measure. So how did Honda break away from the pack? Two things: product quality and smart strategy. Soichiro's engineering prowess meant his bikes steadily improved. They were reliable and got better each year. But equally important, Takeo Fujisawa helped craft brilliant marketing and distribution. They didn't just build good motorcycles, they found better ways to sell them. For example, by the mid-1950s, Honda's bikes had such a good reputation that word-of-mouth demand was exploding. Fujisawa organized a novel distribution system where Honda salesmen literally drove trucks of bikes from town to town across Japan, personally demoing and delivering to local dealers. They went to the customers rather than waiting in Tokyo. This boots-on-the-ground approach built relationships and trust. It was unconventional, but it worked. By 1955, just 7 years after starting, Honda became the #1 motorcycle manufacturer in Japan, leaving hundreds of rivals in the dust. Soichiro wasn't content with just domestic success. He had a bigger vision: to be a world-class manufacturer. He believed that to truly test your product, you should face the world's best on the racetrack. Remember that racing bug he had? It never went away. He famously said, "If Honda does not race, there is no Honda." Racing was a way to push the limits of technology and prove your mettle. So in 1959, Honda became the first Japanese motorcycle maker to enter the legendary Isle of Man TT race, the toughest, most dangerous motorcycle race in the world at the time. They didn't win that year. In fact, they faced several technical failures in early attempts. But Honda's team learned and improved. By 1961, they took home their first trophies in the World Grand Prix circuit, shocking the established European makers. This relentless drive to compete and improve quickly translated into superior bikes for customers. By the early 1960s, Honda had begun exporting worldwide, and riders from Asia to Europe to America loved the affordable, robust Hondas. The real breakthrough in the West came with one iconic model, the Honda Super Cub. Introduced in 1958 as a simple 50cc bike for everyone, it became a global phenomenon. You probably know it by the later US slogan, "You meet the nicest people on a Honda." The Super Cub was cheap, reliable, and ridiculously fuel efficient, perfect for the post-war boom in affordable transport. It was so successful that it eventually became the most produced motor vehicle in history, with over 100 million Super Cubs built worldwide. Yes, 100 million. More than a Model T, more than a VW Beetle, any of them. That's the power of a great product combined with a great vision. Soichiro Honda wanted to empower ordinary people with mobility, and that vision drove the creation of a product that truly conquered the world. By 1959, Honda opened its first dealership in the United States, entering a market dominated by big bikes like Harley-Davidson. The American riders initially saw small Japanese bikes as a joke, but Honda's clever marketing, the Nicest People campaign in 1963, changed that image fast. Sales skyrocketed, and then an incredible thing happened. Honda motorcycles started outselling even the venerable Harley-Davidson in America and Triumph in England, beating the homegrown brands in their own backyards. Think about the magnitude of that. A little company from a war-torn country, a total underdog, overtook established giants on their home turf. By the mid-1960s, Honda was the world's largest motorcycle manufacturer and a household name. Soichiro Honda had gone global. How? By never sacrificing quality, by innovating in products and marketing, and by daring to go where others hadn't. He didn't stop at small bikes or local markets. He kept pushing outward. And as his motorcycle business reached the pinnacle, he set his sights on an even bigger dream, one that many thought was downright crazy: cars. Most people would ride the high of being the world's top motorcycle maker and play it safe. Not Soichiro Honda. In the late 1950s, as his bikes were conquering roads worldwide, he had another vision. He loved cars. Remember, he'd built and raced them in his youth, and he wanted Honda to build cars too. But Japan's government wasn't keen on a small motorcycle company jumping into the car industry. In fact, the Ministry of International Trade and Industry in Japan tried to block Honda from making cars in the early 1960s. They had a plan to consolidate the auto industry and didn't want new entrants. They effectively told Honda, stick to what you're good at, don't pursue cars. Well, telling Soichiro Honda to not do something was the surest way to fire him up. He once quipped, "If our team had to run a business analysis, we would never have ventured into the car business. I simply made a list of the weaknesses of the world's biggest car makers, and that list was quite long." In other words, he didn't care what the conventional wisdom was or what the government said. He saw an opportunity to do better than the existing car companies, and he went for it. The lesson is don't let naysayers or expert analysis kill your dream if you truly believe and have done your homework. Sometimes vision is greater than permission. Blocked from immediately entering the car market, Honda took a clever detour: racing. He decided to prove Honda's engineering prowess on the world stage by entering Formula One racing, the pinnacle of car racing. A bold move for a company that hadn't mass-produced a single car yet. They built a racing car, and by 1965, just a few years later, Honda won the Formula One Grand Prix in Mexico, beating the likes of Ferrari and Lotus. The racing success silenced a lot of doubters. It demonstrated that Honda's technology could compete with the best in the world. Over the next few years, they also dominated in Formula 2 racing with 11 consecutive wins. Soichiro was showing the world, we know engines, we know cars, and we're coming. By the late 1960s, Honda got the green light to mass-produce cars. Soichiro's first production car models, like the tiny Honda N360 and the sporty S600, hit the market. They were different from the big American sedans or even the established Japanese models. They were small, efficient, and fun. But the real jackpot came in 1972 with the launch of the Honda Civic. Soichiro's team had developed an ingenious new engine technology called CVCC, Compound Vortex Controlled Combustion, which made the Civic meet the strict US emission standards of the 1970s without a catalytic converter. While Detroit's giants were struggling to make clean engines to comply with the Clean Air Act, little Honda had cracked the code. The Civic got great gas mileage just as the world faced the oil crisis, and it ran clean. It was the right car at the right time. The Civic became a massive hit globally. In America, its sales took off like a rocket, even becoming the #1 selling car in the US at one point in the small car category. Honda suddenly went from newcomer to a major player in automobiles. By 1973, just 25 years after its founding, Honda Motor Co. was so successful internationally that they decided to open a production plant in the United States, a nearly unthinkable move for a Japanese company back then. Think about the irony. The same country that bombed Soichiro's factory to smithereens in World War II was now welcoming his company to build cars on their soil because Americans loved his products. Soichiro Honda retired in 1973 as president of Honda on the 25th anniversary of the company. He stepped down at the top, with Honda firmly established as a global automotive and motorcycle powerhouse. People magazine later called him the Japanese Henry Ford. But in truth, he was one of a kind. In his lifetime, he saw his company grow from a tiny shack to a multi-billion-dollar multinational. More importantly for him, he saw ideas that once lived only in his head, the cheap motorbike, the small car that could beat the big guys, become reality for millions of customers. Even after retirement, Soichiro stayed on as a supreme advisor and kept tinkering in workshops until his final days. He pursued hobbies like hang gliding and painting, living life with the same zeal he brought to business. He never stopped moving, never stopped dreaming, right up until he passed away in 1991, leaving a legacy that's visible every time you see a Honda logo. So what can you take away from this incredible journey? Let's break down the key lessons from Soichiro Honda's life that you can apply to your own entrepreneurial path. Number 1, persistence in the face of failure. Soichiro Honda failed hard and often. His first factory output was 90% unusable. His plants were bombed to rubble, yet he never saw failure as the end. He saw it as a lesson. Remember his words, success is 99% failure. Every setback was just one step closer to getting it right. When you hit a wall, don't turn around. Climb over it or break through it. Most businesses face early failures. About 50% of startups fail within 5 years. But the ones that succeed are the ones that keep going after failure. Take Honda's story to heart and let your failures refine you, not define you. Number 2, embrace rejection and prove the doubters wrong. Honda was rejected time and time again by Toyota's inspectors, by bankers, even by government officials who told him to stay out of cars. Instead of internalizing rejection, he used it as fuel. You will face naysayers, investors who don't bite, customers who choose a competitor, friends or family who think you're crazy. Don't let their no stop you. Let it light a fire under you. As Honda said, instead of being afraid of the challenge and failure, be afraid of avoiding the challenge and doing nothing. The only sure way to fail is not to try. Soichiro Honda pawned his wife's jewelry to keep his dream alive during tough times. That's how all in he was. Believe in yourself enough to stick with your vision even when others don't. Number 3, innovate and play to your strengths. Honda was an inventor at heart. From forging stamps as a kid to creating new engine designs as an adult, he was obsessed with innovation and doing things differently. When he couldn't get good piston metal, he learned metallurgy. When fuel was scarce, he repurposed a radio engine for a bicycle. When big car companies were complacent, he out-engineered them with a CVCC engine. The lesson? Be a problem solver and think outside the box. Innovation is your edge. Also know your strengths and lean into them. Honda knew he was great with engineering but not finance, so he partnered with Fujisawa to handle the business side. As a result, the company had the best of both worlds. Build a team that complements your skills. You don't have to do it all alone. Number 4, quality and customer focus create luck. Honda had an unwavering commitment to quality and understanding the customer's needs. He personally rebuilt engines to ensure they wouldn't fail on his early customers. He listened to feedback, even from his wife's first test ride, and made improvements. He also understood the market. Post-war consumers needed affordable, efficient vehicles, so that's what he made. By meeting real needs and making truly great products, Honda got lucky in the market. But it wasn't luck, it was insight and dedication. Focus on delivering value and opportunities will find you. Honda's Super Cub didn't become the world's best-selling motorbike by accident. It earned that status by genuinely solving problems for millions of people. Number 5, stay humble and keep learning. Despite his success, Soichiro Honda never became an aloof executive. He wore the same white work overalls as any factory worker because he believed in equality and keeping hands-on. He was known to walk the factory floor, getting his hands dirty, and kept learning new things even into old age. He learned to fly planes in his 70s. This attitude built loyalty in his team and kept him in touch with reality. The takeaway, never think any task is below you and never stop learning. Industries evolve, and the moment you think you know it all, you're done. Honda's lifelong learner mindset allowed him to pivot from bikes to cars to whatever came next. Be curious, be humble, and surround yourself with people who challenge you to grow. Each of these lessons come back to a core idea. Success is a mindset before it's a reality. Soichiro Honda's story is extraordinary, but it's not just luck or genius. It's attitude, resilience, and vision. And those are things you can cultivate in your own journey. So now what's stopping you from achieving your dream? Maybe you've had failures. Maybe you're in the middle of one right now. Maybe people are telling you no, it'll never work, or stick to what you know. I want you to think about Soichiro Honda, a poor blacksmith's son with no degree who blew his first big chance spectacularly, saw his factories reduced to ashes, and still came back to create one of the most successful companies on the planet. He didn't let failure stop him. He let it sculpt him. Every time life said, give up, he said, what's the next step? He kept his vision in focus, whether it was a piston ring, a motorbike for the masses, or a car that could change the world. And he did change the world. One invention, one race, one bike, one car at a time. Honda's journey teaches us that the only real limit is how much you're willing to endure and learn on the road to your goal. As an entrepreneur, your mindset is your greatest asset. Fall in love with the problem you're solving. Take pride in your work. Don't be afraid to get your hands dirty. And when things inevitably go wrong, remember Soichiro Honda standing in the rubble of his dreams, deciding that this was not the end, but the beginning of something new. So now it's your turn. Take that leap, embrace the challenges. When you fail, laugh, learn, and get back up. Dare to dream like Honda did and work like heck to make it real. Your journey will have bumps. That's okay. Every failure is just another step closer to success if you keep moving. Soichiro Honda believed in the power of dreams and persistence, and he proved that one person with a dream can impact millions. You have that power too. So go on, write your own story of persistence, innovation, and impact. And whenever you feel that doubt creeping in, remember this. The guy whose name is on millions of engines worldwide started with less than you have right now. If he could do it, why not you? Keep pushing forward, turn your failures into fuel, and never stop dreaming. Believe. And congratulations, you're one video closer to who you're meant to be. Believe. To watch the untold struggles behind the world's most famous success stories, check the video right there next to me. I think you'll love it. Continue to believe, and I'll see you there. The biggest mistake you're making right now is thinking successful people had it easier than you.
When you want to build something great, it's not easy to do. And when you're doing something that's not easy to do,